Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and I have to start the show by saying that something that I said on last night's stream, a guess of mine, turned out to be wrong. That I had figured that the Vikings would have an intense practice today because they have a preseason game coming up on Friday and they didn't have a very intense practice on Monday. So I thought, okay, well, they're going to get the pads out and back to work we go and football, right? That was not the case today. In fact, it was even more walkthrough-y than it was yesterday. So I'll give you a couple of the takeaways. They did some stuff. They did some red zone, and Max Brosmer had a 2-minute drill opportunity, so we could get out of the way with some of that stuff pretty quickly. But that means what we've got tonight is a lot of opportunity to ask questions. And I also made a list of the players that are under the most pressure going into Friday's game, because I am expecting that tomorrow will be that practice that we were dreaming of the full pads and back to work and all that sort of stuff. And, I'm sure that the Chicago Bears right now are stabbing each other with ancient swords or something, or whatever Ben Johnson's got going in practice. But just for the record, I know it sounds like, well, they had a light practice the other day, another light practice today, but there's some guys that are banged up on this team. Van Ginkel wasn't practicing. Blake Cashman wasn't practicing. Maybe that was just a veteran day. Harrison Smith has been out with an illness. You want them as close to 100% as you can when they get into the real work. And at this moment, this is a very healthy overall roster. So as a person who's always thought that playing starters in the preseason was a bad idea, which I just saw that Chicago is going to play its starters in the final preseason game, that to me is just risking too much. I really changed my opinion on this, or solidified it, back in 2011 when, not 2011, 2021, when Irv Smith Jr. got hurt in the fourth preseason game. And I thought Smith Jr.'s trajectory for his entire career was thrown off by that injury that kept him out for the entire season. And that's what caused the Chris Herndon trade, which we've made fun of so many times, and et cetera, because they got an injury in the last preseason game. You don't want that. O'Connell's not going to play a lot of guys in this last preseason game, and he's not going to have crazy rip-roaring practices as they go into the real NFL season, which starts after cutdown day next Tuesday, and then they get on the practice field and off they go. And we are in regular season mode. So I am expecting maybe one more hardcore practice, and that will be it for what we get to see. But the good news is that the live streaming will not end. In fact, I was just workshopping with producer Jonathan Harrison today of what our live stream is going to look like during the regular season. And I think that a lot of you who have reached out have convinced me to do this a lot more than we had been doing a lot of live shows. We've got Manny Hill coming back. Brian Murphy's going to be part of a roundtable. Jeremiah Searles will definitely return to the show for Tuesday Morning Left Guard, which is going to air at night on Tuesday because we can record in the afternoon. And then we're going to go from there. Tons of good guests. As always, Andrew Kramer previewing the next game. Dane Mizutani post game. So we're putting it all together. And Maggie Robinson, who is on tonight, will be a part of that lineup as well. So it's very exciting times, and I've loved the response to all the live streaming, so I'm not going to stop doing it since you guys seem to have enjoyed it and the shows have done well. But the practices will be over tomorrow. So I'll tell you the small number of things that we saw today. I believe I counted up in 7-on-7s or 11-on-11s. I think I got to 5 JJ McCarthy throws today. That's all there were. I mean, it was really a walkthrough type of practice where they were working on doing a lot of just they're walking through. That's what it is. Slow motion. Here's how this route works. Here's when you're letting it go. Here's how this play works. Here's what the call is. Talking over things. So we're standing on the sideline, just kind of enjoying a sunny day. And then they did a couple of drills. To start the practice, actually, Max Brosmer ran a 2-minute drill and drove the team down the field and scored a touchdown. And that was actually impressive. They were ramping it up a little bit there because it's a lot of the guys on the field that are going to play in the preseason game. And a couple of them stuck out to me. Xavier Scott was in the backfield. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins was out there taking some reps with that group. So I think he's a guy that should play more in the preseason as someone who's popped to me and could develop into something, but is not ready yet necessarily. So I think we are going to see a lot of players worth watching in this preseason game. And I'm going to get to my list of guys under pressure. But just looking at who was on the field, there were quite a few players where I was like, interested in what he does, interested in what he does. And Brosmer, of course, is very high on that list for people that Vikings fans will be watching. So he ran a 2-minute drill, scored a touchdown, looked in pretty good command. Then later in the practice, they ran some 11 on 11 down at the goal line. And there was one highlight throw from JJ McCarthy. So I might as well tell you about it. He went through a progression and then found Thayer Thomas in the back of the end zone. And that kind of leads into the conversation because there's a lot of wide receiver drama here when it comes to everyone behind Jalen Nailor on the depth chart. And I'll just begin my list right there. And you can throw your questions in, your comments in about the list and how you feel about this upcoming preseason game and what you're looking for you. Who is under the most pressure? Who should be under the most pressure? And who are you watching the most in this upcoming preseason game? I will begin with the wide receivers. Obviously, I mean, I think that they need to play everyone who is on the roster, not named Jordan Addison, and of course, Jalen Nailor. And that means, as of today, Tim Jones, Lucky Jackson, Thayer Thomas, and Ty Felton are all guys that have an opportunity to stand out and prove to this coaching staff that they deserve the opportunity when they first go out there for week one. Because Lucky Jackson, to me, has had, I think, after jumping out ahead of everybody else, not been able to really grip on to that role, and a couple of drops, which I know it's just a couple drops. It was not the end of the world, but a guy like him can't really afford too many drops. And so what we've seen the last few days in practice is Tim Jones getting the opportunity. So somebody said in the chat last night, and I don't blame you, like, we have a guy named Tim Jones. I mean, if you weren't watching every practice out there and you haven't watched the fourth quarters of preseason games, first of all, how dare you? But second of all, you could miss Tim Jones. He is a former Jacksonville Jaguars special teamer who has a grand total of 17 receptions for 154 yards in his career. And I don't think they ever thought that we would be getting to a point where they would be saying, all right, well, Tim Jones, go out there and take first team reps. Much more of a guy that if he was going to win a spot on the roster, that it would have had to have been just through special teams. But now, since he is experienced and he had 5 catches in the last preseason game, there you go. Tim Jones. Get familiar with the name, even if it's just for this Friday. I don't know how long the Tim Jones experiment will happen, but he was out there with JJ McCarthy running routes today, and he is the top of the list under pressure. I think Lucky Jackson, though, is the guy who knows the offense the best, and with a good game can kind of solidify, hey, it was just random that I dropped those couple of balls, catch 4 or 5 passes, show the coaching staff something. Like the way that O'Connell presented it, and it sounds a little bit ridiculous, right? Like, oh, it all comes down to this preseason game in Tennessee, right? I mean, it shouldn't with all this practice time, but it kind of has to. Like, they have to break the tie somehow. And Jackson has gotten all these reps throughout the summer. He's been impressive at times. He's been maybe disappointing at times. Well, if you treat this like it's a big game, guess what? Every Sunday, pretty big games. So Lucky Jackson needs to show something in this game as well to hold on to that spot, and also to try to convince the Vikings that they don't have to go out and get another wide receiver, which I have been in favor for. I can tell you today, because it was not the most exciting practice, because we weren't sitting there with notebooks scratching down. I mean, Judd was, of course, because he's always doing that. But we weren't scratching down every single warm-up throw from JJ McCarthy in a slow practice. So what do you think we were doing? we were debating Adam Thielen on the sideline. Do you go after Thielen? And, so I like to use this as a mind experiment. I like to use this to try to get rid of our preconceived notions. So I saw, in the comments yesterday for that show where I argued for Adam Thielen, there was a lot of, well, he's not worth this much. He's not worth that much, which it really wouldn't be that much money. You don't have to pay him, and they can fit him under the salary cap. But what I like to do is try to use an experiment to get rid of our biases, because I think that there is some element of, really, you're going to try to bring back a guy who's older and he's not the same version of himself. And we've seen that movie before. Sheldon Richardson came back. It wasn't that great, that kind of thing. And I'm sure there's a lot of other examples throughout Vikings history. But if his name was Tim Jones instead of Adam Thielen, think about this. If his name was Tim Jones and he had 151 catches over the last 2 years, and he was suddenly becoming available because another team decided that they wanted to play their younger wide receivers, which is the case in Carolina. They drafted someone in the first round. What was Xavier Legette last year? Was he a second round pick? And then they have this guy, Jalen Coker, who has just sort of come alive for them and become a dude. So they've got these young players that they want to raise around their young quarterback. No real space at the end for the guy who's 30-something years old. If that was the case for some other city and the guy whose name was Tim Jones and not Adam Thielen, I think there'd be a pretty much a consensus. Like, yeah, if you can get that guy, then get him with the current wide receiver situation. But these receivers have their chance. Tim Jones, Lucky Jackson, I think, has the best chance to convince the Vikings, hey, I know you guys are making phone calls, but stop it. Put down that phone. Lucky Jackson's here. He's got a chance in this game. And I would also say the same for Thayer Thomas, who is on his third really good training camp. He's not somebody we talk about a ton. I compared him to BC Johnson from a few years ago, where there was nothing physically impressive about BC Johnson, but he was smart and he had good hands and he ran decent routes and he caught a handful of passes. And, Jarius Wright is always the one that we go back to, because Jarius Wright was just really good at his job. And Jarius was fast, so, he had that going for him. But there wasn't anything mind-blowing about Jarius Wright, but just do your job and catch the football. And in this offense, where everybody's looking at Justin Jefferson, you might be able to make a difference. And Thayer has done a good job in the joint practices. And then today, and I know it was a slow practice. It wasn't the most physical situation ever, but he's the guy that J.J. McCarthy found in the end zone. So maybe there's even somewhat of an argument for Thayer Thomas as well. Sometimes I think about, every once in a while, a random fan will show up from a different team in the comment section of them listening to this. Well, this guy has 17 career catches, and this guy played in the XFL, and this guy is an undrafted free agent who's been on the practice squad, and they must be like, who plays for this football team? But that's the situation that they're in. And then I also have on the list, and I put him fourth on the list here. It's not like a ranking or whatever, but just when I was thinking off the top of my head, all right, who's under pressure for this preseason game? And I'll even throw tomorrow's practice into that if it is an intense practice. Ty Felton. When they were running guys with the first team, I saw 1 rep for Ty Felton. So he has not put himself in this camp ahead of guys like Thayer and Lucky and Tim Jones. And I've said repeatedly that I think that he's just got to develop. He's got to learn. All these guys, I think Thayer Thomas is 26. Lucky Jackson's 27. Tim Jones is, let's look. How old is Tim Jones? He is... Tim Jones has done so little in the NFL, they don't even put a date of birth on his PFF page. But he was drafted in 2021, so that's 5 years in the league. There's experience there with these guys, and Felton doesn't have that, so that's probably why they've been pushed forward. But Ty Felton's got his opportunity. I thought he did a good job catching passes in both preseason games. Keep showing him, but really the pressure is on Ty Felton as a kick returner. He fumbled in the last game. They've been very committed to him as a kick returner, along with Ty Chandler was back there today again with him. I still can't decide what I think they're going to do with Ty Chandler. The last 53, I had him on it. I was talking to other reporters today who made their 53s. They didn't have him on it, and they had Xavier Scott. And also, Scott has been another guy back there returning. Hard to figure out, but maybe they'll start to figure that out for us. I don't know if Ty Chandler is going to play in this game because if they do want to cut him, they don't want to get him hurt, or if they think that there's a possibility of a seventh round pick swap or something for somebody else who might want Ty Chandler. We'll see about that. But Ty Felton has a lot of pressure here. I think he has to really show that he can be that kick returner because they want that to happen. But if there are issues again, they might have to make a little switcheroo there. You just get so few opportunities to evaluate the kick returners that somebody like Felton's got to show his stuff. So the wide receivers very clearly, very, very clearly under the most pressure. And then up next, unsurprisingly, is the quarterbacks. I do have other people on this list. Oh, I should also mention Miles Price. Miles Price was a breakout player in the last preseason game, 81-yard return and a 22-yard punt return, had another one for another 10 yards where he looked pretty comfortable and was under pressure. It's not the same as being in Chicago and trying to track the ball down with the swirling winds and all that, but Miles Price was a true breakout player. And we were just talking about Mr. Mankato yesterday, and well, could it be this guy? Could it be that guy? I mean, Miles Price might be the guy if he wins a roster spot from a kick and punt returning who just arrived on the scene and showed us something out of virtually nowhere. But he's under pressure as well because I noticed today that he was taking a lot of reps with the wide receivers. And I believe he was the one that caught the touchdown when Max Brosmer had his 2-minute drill. So they're looking for him as a receiver, and he showed that he's got something there as a returner. Can he do it again and maybe win a job? I mean, I've not often thought that the third preseason game should determine jobs, but we've kind of run all the way to the end of the road on what we've seen in practice, and someone's got to go in the big moment for them. This is their Super Bowl for some of these undrafted free agents. Go shine under the bright lights, the dull lights of the Tennessee Titans' broken stadium. So there you go, the wide receivers. Quarterbacks, of course. I am really interested to see, does Sam Howell play, and how much does Sam Howell play? If it's a wide open competition still for backup quarterback, then he better be playing, right? Unless that's just sort of something you always say when, you're a head coach and you don't want to, just anoint the backup quarterback who hasn't played well, because then everyone's going to be like, what the heck? He just went 1 for 5 with a pick and you're saying he's locked into number, maybe as a coach, you're always saying, hey, that's open. But with O'Connell, I don't remember him doing that too often in the past with other quarterbacks. It's not like he said it was I don't remember him saying, oh, it's a wide open competition with Jaron Hall and Nick Mullins. It was clearly Nick Mullins was the backup. So this is a little bit different. And your eyes have not deceived you on Sam Howell. It didn't look good the other day. And it's been more down than up overall in practice. But does Brett Rippon really have a chance to be QB2? I mean, if he executes the offense better, maybe he does. And I don't think Brosmer can be QB2, but he can certainly solidify his spot as QB3. And another thing we were debating, maybe this should be a bit on the show of like what was being talked about by the reporters out at TCO Performance Center, because there is a lot of standing around for this job. You wait for a press conference to start, you wait for a locker room to open, or you wait for players to come off the field or whatever. So we chat about different stuff. And the fear of players getting poached was a topic today. I have always been on the side of there's too much fear of that. It's just something we have to say, but almost never do these guys. Now, sometimes in the season they do. Like, oh man, we got 8 players hurt. We need to steal somebody else's guard off of, waivers or something, or off of somebody's practice squad. But on cut down day, usually these teams are pretty solid and they want their guys on the 53. And maybe that's because they're all afraid of poaching, and it would happen more if they weren't all afraid of it. I don't know, but it doesn't happen that often. So could you actually get Max Brosmer to a practice squad, or are we overrating that? I think that might be a situation where he could get picked up, and it could be that rare instance could be the rare instance if he played very well in this preseason game and everybody's watching the tapes out there, and then, somebody needs a QB3. The rules kind of lend themselves a little more to QB3s. But at the end of the day, all these quarterbacks are under an immense amount of pressure for this game. How much does Sam Howell play? Does he go out there for one series and then he's done? And that would kind of indicate, hey, they're just going to roll with this. Or is it a little more? Do they play him for a lot of the first quarter and then they play Rippon for a good amount of time and then Brosmer for the second half like they did for the last preseason game? I think if that's the case, if there are multiple series for Sam Howell, then that probably means that they're going out of their way to evaluate him. If he doesn't play at all, well, then I think we know that he's either going to get cut or he's on the team as QB2, and those are the only two options. So the quarterbacks, I mean, I think everybody wants to see Max Brosmer and what he's able to do with another opportunity. He has been very good in the right ways. He has been on time with getting rid of the football. He has been accurate. He has seemed in command of the offense and just looks like a pro quarterback. And I know it's against lesser competition, but still, like, looks like a pro quarterback. And I would like to see him if they're mostly settled on Sam Howell as QB2, and the whole open competition thing is just something you have to say. Then I would like to see him get in the first half and play against some second team type caliber players, and maybe get some second team caliber players in front of him as well as blockers and receivers. Although those guys are going to run a lot of routes, I guess, on Friday night. But the quarterback competition is at least worth tuning in to the Vikings matchup with the Titans because of that. I'll run through the other guys that I have on my list. Xavier Scott trying to earn a 53-man roster position. If he starts and plays, then he's got one more chance to say, hey, don't you want Xavier Scott? I mean, because I've really liked the way that he's played in this preseason and training camp. Just go out there and have one more good game for him and show something one more time and leave a lasting impression. He's a guy that I do think they could get to the practice squad, though. I would be very surprised if he was picked up by anyone. That has to factor in, but this is, I think, a big opportunity. It's the best opportunity he's ever going to get is this game. Michael Juergens bounced back from some issues with snapping the football in camp and then in the last game, but still, I mean, that guy is under the microscope every time he goes out because Ryan Kelly's history with injuries, he might have to play. And I think he's been okay in the preseason. I think he's been okay in practice. It hasn't been inspiring because it's a backup center, but it's also after an early, I think, pretty tough run, it's settled down for Juergens in this role. I've got Ben Urasek, who has a chance to solidify tight end 3. I was looking up today, Urasek, and this is where we're at, folks. This is where we're at. This is why you listen to this show right here. The next sentence I'm going to say is why you are here this evening to listen to the show. I was looking up Ben Urasek's preseason run blocking numbers on PFF, and I saw that he's been pretty good, and it made me think, well, that role, that tight end 3, it is more of a run blocking type of role where you have to occasionally sneak out into the flat and catch a ball. So Urasek, if he's been successful as a run blocker, if he gets the offense, he should be the guy for tight end 3. But again, one more opportunity to prove that. And 4. I didn't forget the punting competition. 4, Elijah Williams. Really just want to see him, honestly. He's been so good in these couple of games. Wondering, since Levi Drake Rodriguez has been out, I don't know the severity of Levi Drake Rodriguez's injury, but if that could end up altering how they handle the 53, if Levi ends up on IR to start the season, and again, he might be back next week. We just don't get injury reports during the preseason and training camp. But I wondered about if he goes on IR, if that opens a spot for Elijah Williams to make the 53. But again, he's got to convince him like everybody else. Mekhi Blackmon, he was out there today with the unit going against Max Brosmer, which makes you think he's going to play a lot in the game again. He did not look very good to me. Didn't score well by PFF in the last game or the first preseason game. Hasn't really looked like himself during this training camp. This is one more opportunity to turn a corner a little bit in his recovery from that ACL injury. But he needs as much action as he can get, I think, because he is the next man up. if they're not happy with Okuda or if there is an injury at any point in that cornerback group, it's got to be him. Or, I guess Zemiah Vaughn, I could throw that in there as well. And then the last guy under pressure is Oscar freaking Chapman. That's right, Oscar Chapman, the last guy under pressure, because you know what? He's made it interesting, guys. He has made it legitimately interesting in this punting competition. And I think that there is a very small chance the fact that they can keep him as the international exception. I mean, that does matter to the discussion. Absolutely. But if he just straight up punts his butt off like he did the other night, Oscar Chapman could be your punter for this year. And that would be actually pretty interesting. So, all right. That is your rundown of today and of my thoughts about who is under pressure. And I'll even include, tomorrow's practice as well as the game. And we'll go from there. So who's under pressure for you guys going into the rest of this week and the final waning moments of the preseason and training camp? And then other questions, comments you got in about 20 minutes or so, depending on the fervor of the chat. We'll have Maggie Robinson drop into the show, and we'll go around the league with some things going on with her as well. So Kit says, not to pick on somebody while he's down, but any idea what's been up with the drops from Lucky Jackson? It seems like his momentum has evaporated. It does feel like that. And if I had to guess, and I don't want to play, practice squad guy psychologist here with this, but if I had to guess, I would probably just say pressure. I mean, you could, if you're Lucky Jackson, you could kind of smell it. I mean, it's been a long journey. He was on this show. Remember, if you watch that interview, he was on this show and we talked about this guy was working at a pharmacy and he was going at night to play in indoor football league games. And he went to Canada and he went to the XFL. I mean, then 2 years on the practice squad to arrive right here, right now at this point where you're going to get your chance. And if you even think about this, like Tim Jones has a chance to make this team. If you're Lucky Jackson and you get in the game, let's say Naylor's out. We don't know where that's at right now. Let's say Naylor's out. Or let's say that he's wide receiver 3. You get in the game, make a handful of catches, make an impression for yourself. I mean, you might have a career from here on out for 5 or 6 more years or something. There's a lot of pressure. And I think that gets in guys' heads. And you know who we really saw it with? Was KJ Osborne in 2023. KJ in 21 and 22 he was good. He was just a solid, really good wide receiver. And then in 23, what did we talk about the whole time, right? The contract. He's going to be a free agent. They drafted Addison. He knows it. This is his big moment. And he had a lot of drops. And I think it gets into guys' heads sometimes, like, this is my moment. And this is what really, we take Justin Jefferson for granted because he's just Justin Jefferson, and Moss was here, and Carter and Diggs and Thielen, and good wide receivers are just everywhere. The fact that Justin Jefferson every single week has so much pressure on him with this team and just goes up and catches the ball like it's nothing. And you're like, oh, Justin Jefferson went up and got a 50-50 ball and mossed some guy and then grittied into the end zone. Like, of course he did. He's Justin Jefferson. And then you see how hard it is to actually make it with someone like Lucky Jackson. So I think that's what it is. But it's also 2 drops in a preseason game. I mean, that shouldn't negate his entire offseason. But it was clear that coming back this week, Tim Jones was with that first team and Thayer Thomas was out there more. So I think that they want to put some pressure on, some even more pressure, like, hey, buddy, that's not going to work. Dropping balls in the regular season, that is not going to work. Conrad says, who do you think will replace Jalen Naylor in the starting lineup until Addison returns? Who do I think it's going to be? I mean, as of right now, I think Lucky still makes the most sense if they're not going to get someone else. But I think I want to make a bet that it's someone else. This is where I go back and forth because it's getting late here in the season. You kind of have to do this soon. At the same time, they added Stephon Gilmore late. And if they make a move to get, I'm going to throw Adam Thielen's name out there, but Amari Cooper, Brandon Powell, whoever's still out there, if they go get someone else, they can still acclimate that person for week one and get them going. As much as training camp is important, if it's someone who's been around the league, to jump right into a game plan, especially if it's someone who's been here before, maybe even KJ Osborne, uh, I might say that the person replacing Jalen Naylor is not yet in the building. That was a long conversation with myself and Andrew Kramer today. We were going back and forth because he thinks that the person is in the building. He thinks it's Tim Jones or Lucky Jackson is going to be the one that takes over Naylor's job, and then Naylor moves up. What might determine this is Naylor's injury. If Naylor's injury turns out to be more serious and he's got to have surgery, for example, not that Kevin O'Connell would tell us if that's an option they're considering, but if he has to have surgery and he's going to be out a couple of weeks or something, I think then you're pressured to do it. I don't think you can have Lucky Jackson and Tim Jones as your other wide receivers next to Justin Jefferson. You probably have to go get someone else. But as of right now, I think I would just go with Tim Jones because he's played before, and then we'll see after that. But this is why they're at the top of the list, man, is because we don't know. It still seems to be undecided. Hunter says, how does McCarthy's arm compare to Cousins when he was a Viking? It's quite different. It's quite different. Two guys that get the job done in a different manner. So Kirk Cousins, he learned over the years how to use his entire body to get as much velocity as he possibly could. And when Cousins could get all of his body behind the football, he could make it zoom. But as far as raw, pure arm strength, it wasn't great. So just the only way that I know how to explain this so everyone understands it would be by Madden terms, because I think we all think that way anyway with throw power, throw accuracy, right? And then O'Connell will come in with this arm talent thing, and that's a different definition and whatever. Let's just stick with throw power, throw accuracy for these two quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins, probably when he first got to Minnesota, his arm, I think, was stronger than when he left. And I thought it was really 22 to 23, somewhere in there, where it just didn't seem like it had the same jump. But he still played well at times during those seasons. It just didn't have the same velocity. So let's just go back to maybe Kirk when he first got here. I would have given Kirk like an 87 throw power and like a 91 accuracy. Like he was an accurate quarterback, or maybe like 84. Let's go 84 throw power and 91 accuracy. He was somebody that had to put a lot of his body into it. He wasn't going to make that thing totally rocket off platform or, just based on his arm alone. And it didn't have this kind of whoa to it when you saw him throw in practice. But he was very good at throwing with anticipation. So you would see on the tape where someone hadn't even come out of their break yet, and he would throw it out in front of them. And he was a very accurate quarterback. McCarthy, I would probably go the opposite, where it would be something like 92 throw power and 79 accuracy at this moment. He was really super accurate in the joint practices in the second day, not as much in the first day. I expect that from him during the season, but he can use just his arm and absolutely rip the ball. I mean, a straight line, rocket type of velocity. But then there's another that's like throwing deep is a different thing. Kirk was very good at throwing down the field, but he did it with anticipation and accuracy and throwing to spots, whereas McCarthy is going to do it by letting the ball rip. So it's very different. It's very different. And then Sam Darnold had just everything. He had great touch, great velocity. He could throw the ball with, and this is something McCarthy could do that Kirk could never do, and Darnold was great at it. If guys are falling at his feet and he can't get his feet set, Darnold could just kind of turn his shoulders and rip it. And I think McCarthy can do that, not quite to the same level as Darnold, but I think he can do that, whereas Kirk could not. And that was the reason why, if the pocket was collapsing, it was just over for whatever game the Vikings were playing in with Kirk Cousins, because he really needed to step into the ball. He was not going to be able to get it 25 yards to a receiver as he was just sort of stuck in place. Like, he needed to bring it down, get his whole everything activated, drive off the ground. And I think that made life harder for them. But, it's an interesting question, because evaluating quarterbacks' arms, it's so much more than the Madden, throw power and throw accuracy. You can be a little less accurate, but if you make plays and you scramble, and Brian Flores was talking about this today, just how much his scrambling has strained their defense during this time in preseason. And you've seen that in the preseason game or I'm in training camp. He's done it a lot on the late drills and stuff. So every quarterback is his own set of, strengths and weaknesses. And I think for McCarthy, raw arm strength is one of his strengths. And for Kirk, it was probably more of one of his weaknesses. Brett, am I planning to have Judd on the show before the season begins? We talked about that the other day at practice. The fans of Judd's have asked a number of times. Judd and I are great friends. So yes, what we were talking about the other day is it can only be special occasions. I mean, this is a special start to a season. So I am planning on, yes, getting Judd on. Courtney will be on before the Bears week. Yep, that is definitely going to happen as well. Sloss says wide receiver idea I haven't heard yet. Braxton Berrios, buried on the Texans depth chart, could be a return gadget guy. I like it. Yep, I like it. Kind of falls into that same category as I mean, not quite an Adam Thielen, who's more proven and more of an underneath guy, but as a Brandon Powell, like a rich man's Brandon Powell, maybe if they decide to release Braxton Berrios. Thank you, TL, for the super chat. Really appreciate that. TL says injuries are the reason I don't have expectations. Do you mean for this season or does that have to do with the preseason? Like you don't have expectations for any of these preseason games because you want to avoid injuries. As far as like making your expectations for this team around the possibility of injuries, I would just say this. I have seen every part of the spectrum when it comes to this. I've seen Vikings teams that were young that got injured left and right. I've seen Vikings teams that were old that got injured. I've seen Vikings teams that were old that stayed completely healthy. 2022 is a good example of that. 2022 is an ancient team, but they all stayed healthy all the way through the season, and they won a lot of games because of it. You can just never know. You just never know. All you can do is, if you're in your seat, is just hope that people don't go down left and right. But I always create expectations for the team and for players on the assumption that they're going to be an average health team. And then we'll see which way the needle pushes. A lot of injuries in the NFL are just random. Somebody runs into somebody, like it happens. So I know that they are on the older side as a team, and some of these guys are coming off injuries, but I don't even know if that's predictive either, because you think about like Anthony Barr had a nasty injury and then he came back and played after that. And Danielle Hunter was out for an entire year with a neck thing that I thought might end his career. I was really concerned for Danielle Hunter after he missed 2020 and had surgery and all that stuff. I mean, you hear neck and a defensive end, you're like, oh my gosh, this could be terrible for him. Came back. Then he had another injury after that. Now he's injury prone. And then he's played like every game since. I mean, who can really predict it when it comes to injuries? There are some guys that you would be more concerned than others, like Ryan Kelly, but you should be able to survive at least some games without someone like that. The other guys, Jonathan Allen came back and played in the playoffs last year. Hargrave, I think he had a similar injury to what Danielle had. So I don't know. And there's a lot of these players who are in their primes. Grenard's in his prime. Jefferson's in his prime. Addison's coming into it. And even if Jones gets banged up in the backfield, you got Jordan Mason in his prime. I don't know. Who can ever predict injuries? I wouldn't limit expectations for this team because of that. I would set them exactly where they belong. Jake says, I heard Addison will play in the preseason. Is that true? No. I would not expect to see Jordan Addison. If he did, I would be surprised. I guess you'll have to tell me where you heard that, because he didn't play in the last preseason game, and it would be really, he's going to miss 3 games, not 13. You want him to be 100%. You don't want him to hurt his ankle or something. I mean, he got hurt last year in the joint practices and then got banged up in week 1 and was out until week 5? You don't want something like that to happen in a preseason game. Plus, one of O'Connell's arguments, which I think is really compelling about not playing starters, is that there are guys out there who are desperately trying to make teams. And some of the times they'll just push it too far. and they'll go for a late hit, or they'll try to make a hero play, dive in for something that they can't get to and injure somebody. You wouldn't want to put Jordan Addison out there. Frank, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate that. Conrad says, what about KJ Osborne or Brandon Powell? Both options are fine, but it makes me a little bit concerned about both. Now, anybody you're bringing in, there's a reason he's available. Like, they weren't thrilled with Brandon Powell last year. His returning was not great last year. I think they were one of the worst return teams in the entire league in punt and kick, but he's the punt returner. It didn't yield them almost anything. And then he never really became the gadget player that we thought he would. I thought when they signed Brandon Powell that he was going to be this quick twitch, like run, a reverse for him, run a bubble screen, get the ball in his hand. It just never happened for Brandon Powell. And he actually turned into a halfway decent route runner. There was the game against San Francisco where he stepped in. There was the Josh Dobbs game where he caught the game-winning touchdown. So I like Brandon a lot. I think he can actually play real wide receiver, but there's probably a reason they decided to bring in someone like Tim Jones and not bring Powell back. There has to be a reason for that, right? And Osborne has fallen off the face of the earth since he left Minnesota. We think about all that pressure that was on him that I was talking about earlier. Oh, you're going to get the big contract, and KJ Osborne could be worth $10 million a year if he has a big season. But then he goes to New England on a small contract, not a lot there. He's been in Washington. He might be available. Like, is that the same guy that we saw here back in 2022? Michael says, can't wait to hear your list and thoughts on the outside linebacker room. Okay. The outside linebacker room. Okay, I'll give you something on that. So I didn't include an outside linebacker under pressure, but I will give you one. This is a bonus under pressure player just for you. That is Chaz Chambliss. Chaz Chambliss. What a name. The reason is because Chaz Chambliss has played more special teams snaps than any other player on the Vikings over these first two preseason games. And I noticed him at inside linebacker and outside linebacker, which makes me wonder, are they cross-training him as a backup for both of those positions and maybe having him as someone who is on special teams? Now, some of this could depend on, if anybody goes on IR, then all of a sudden these 53-man rosters that we've got, well, they don't, look exactly the same. Chambliss, they paid him a good amount to come here, and I think he's had a kind of a low-key good preseason, good training camp, but is he somebody that you can get to the practice squad? Probably, but I think he has a chance to make a real impression. So that's why I didn't think he was under pressure necessarily, but he has a chance to make an impression. And I saw Gabe Murphy. I don't know what happened today exactly, but Gabe Murphy left practice a little early, so that might be something to keep an eye on. I also think that Murphy's probably not someone I would play in this game because he has shown a lot so far. And so I think you're going to be getting guys who won't make the team. And maybe Bo Richter will play still. He's a special teamer, but maybe there's like a low-key Bo Richter, Chaz Chambliss name off for an outside linebacker spot. I don't think so, though. I think Richter proved himself on special teams, but Chambliss he's stepped up when he's gotten a chance. So there's your outside linebacker room update. Let's see. Connor says, in the KOC era, which non-wide receiver would have been the best wide receiver if they were just thrown in there? So you're talking about like a running back, I would assume, or are you talking about everybody? If you're talking about everybody, I'll go Patrick Peterson. I think that Patrick Peterson could have played anything, anytime, anywhere, any era. If Peterson had started out as a little kid playing quarterback, he would have been Lamar Jackson. This is a guy who's one of the all-time great athletes in the NFL. They put him back as a punt returner in his first year in Arizona, and he housed like 3 punt returns. This dude is ridiculous at everything. They would talk about how great he was at basketball. Like, he could do just about anything. So if you're talking about all positions, I would say Patrick Peterson. I don't know that they've had too many running backs who can step into that role or other positions, but Patrick Peterson could definitely have been that guy. For Zimmer, I think it would have been Anthony Harris. Yeah, maybe. maybe he had really good hands, but being a wide receiver, there's a lot to it, like with route running and quickness. I don't know if he was the quickest. See, that's where Peterson, the quickness, I think it would have helped him a lot. I don't know if Anthony Harris had that. He had kind of longer speed. Rob says Lucky took a step backward last week, but it was just one quarter. Price flashed enough to get another look. And that's the thing about with Lucky Jackson. After a pretty good camp, I don't want to make this all about one quarter and, like you said, 2 drops, but they're pretty egregious drops. And if you're feeling the pressure and you're feeling the heat and you're going out there going, I better make the catch, and then you're dropping the ball. I mean, what's it going to be like at Soldier Field? This is of course a show that has been interested in Lucky Jackson's journey since, what was it, 2020? I mean, he was great in the XFL. I watched the hell out of that league. I enjoyed that league. It's a cool story. It would be great if he could be that guy and make some NFL catches. And you're just like, this is why we play this game, right? Like there's stories like this. But when you got the biggest moments in your career, like he had last week, go out there and make a couple plays and you don't make them, that's going to go into the evaluation. It has to. So that's why going into this game, I think if Lucky comes out of it and plays really well, it will influence their feeling on the wide receiver room. But it is unfair to him to just, dwell on 2 plays when, he's been catching. I mean, and the other thing about that is he's been catching balls from JJ McCarthy this entire time. And then it was Howell throwing him the ball, but you got to catch it. Got to catch it. Anthony says, why does not one bring up that the Bears beat the Bills 38-6? Was it 38-6? Did the Bills score? The Bears played the game serious because of bad reports and played 2s and 3s. Yeah, I mean, that we talked about a little bit last night about how it's the moth to the flame. We can't help ourselves, that any football in front of us, we're going to want to react to. I mean, think about if a college team, if Arch Manning plays against Finger Lakes Community College, which is where I spent 2 years of my life, and they win 77-0, they'll still go on TV the next day and be like, Arch Manning looks the part, guys. I know it was Matt's community college and they don't even have a football program and they just put a couple guys out there, but he looks the part, guys, because it's football and it was in front of me and I saw it. And the same thing is with the Bears running the Bills backups off the field. Like, that just means 0 to my thought process on Caleb Williams. I think it's actually more telling that they want to go run their starters again. That makes me think, well, you guys can't really be rock solid on where you're at as an offense if you're running in the 3rd preseason game. I mean, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think they also had joint practices too. I mean, by week 17, the Bears are going to be dead. It is a long season with 17 games, man. It is a long season. Let's see. Frank says, agree with some people saying no to AR-19. Is that, or do you mean Adam Thielen on the same page saying they should pick up? Oh, I see what you're saying. Some people saying no to Thielen are the same people saying that they should pick up OBJ and Amari Cooper. Oh, AT. Yeah. Okay. There's a typo. Right. I mean, none of those options are guys who have been in their prime recently. All of them are kind of, maybe. I think that Thielen looked to me like he had the most life of any of those receivers last year. Like, OBJ doesn't look like anywhere near the old guy. And here's the other part of this too. Amari Cooper and OBJ are two, and I know someone's going to be like, did you know Thielen ran a 4.45? Yes, I know. I've been told 100 times. Adam Thielen did not win as a NFL player with raw speed. Okay. He was big and he used strength, technique, hands, ball tracking, knowledge of the playbook, chemistry with the quarterback, and had enough speed to be an NFL wide receiver. But guys like OBJ and Amari Cooper, high draft picks, superstars out of college, these guys used explosiveness. Like, Thielen did not just jet past people. And when the explosiveness dies for guys who use that to win their entire career, it goes off the edge of the earth. That's why Anquan Bolden and Larry Fitzgerald, those were two guys that just didn't, they were fast, yeah, but they didn't use their burst to win all the time. They used strength, technical elements, and great hands. So I think Thielen's a guy who's aged better than some of these other wide receivers because he didn't have to use that. That's why it's more interesting to me than those two guys. But if the Vikings sign Amari Cooper, I mean, it's not like he was horrendous last year. So, okay, it'll be very telling how they feel coming out of the preseason game. The fact, though, and this could change tomorrow, so we may need an emergency podcast, who knows? But the fact that they haven't gone out and gotten someone else yet, that they did not do it this week, does make you think, A, that they feel like Naylor will come back, but also it makes you think that they at least want to give it a look. They at least want to try it because they didn't bring in somebody, and this would have been the week to do it, to get somebody acclimated. So they're at least going to give them the chance of this third preseason game. And boy, does that give me something to write about, because remember when we had a third preseason game and they canceled the punter competition? That was like at the top of my list then. Now I feel like we got a lot more to work with here. Rob says Jashawn Jones been pretty solid too, must be in the mix. I think that he has fallen behind in that mix. You look at the way that they played. I didn't include him. You look at the way that they played, the usage for who was out there at the beginning of the last preseason game. He's been also banged up this week, so I don't even know for sure that he's going to play. I didn't see him out there participating today. So another wide receiver that's banged up, but it feels like there's been Lucky, Thayer, and Tim Jones as the main guys, then Ty Felton with the second team pretty exclusively. And Jashawn Jones is just, got hurt yesterday. Not sure what happened, but wasn't participating, but wasn't getting anywhere near the reps. He was getting much more with the 2s and 3s than he was for some of those other guys. So it feels like that's separated. Dino, any update on Ginkle, Van Ginkle? No, I mean, he hasn't been practicing, but it just, when you see a guy out there kind of in his jersey, standing around watching practice, he's not doing any rehabbing or anything, I just assume that it's probably not serious, and it hasn't been brought up with O'Connell. I'm sure we can try to get more information on that, but for certain guys, it just doesn't, it looks like maybe he's dealing with bumps and bruises and he's going to be okay. There hasn't been any update on him. I don't know that he's been out long enough for anyone to really ask, but that's something that we got to bring up at some point with O'Connell. We'll see though. Really the next time is when we get an injury report. Then we start to get all the information that we're looking for, is when there's an injury report. It doesn't strike me as serious. He stood and watched practice today with Blake Cashman. I don't need Andrew Van Ginkel to practice. That's where I think the Vikings are very smart with this stuff. Oh, you've got anything? Stand over there. If it's not the regular season, stand over there. Don't push through injuries right now. Conrad, so this Friday's Titans game is the Super Bowl for all these teams. It's, what it is it's the Super Bowl for some guys. The amount of players that are going into that game for this team who are fighting for something, it's the biggest game on their slate. That's for sure. All the guys we've been talking about, these wide receivers, I really want to see more from Elijah Williams on the defensive side. I mean, it should be important to Mekhi Blackmon to prove that he deserves to be out there. Zemiah Vaughn's fighting for a spot. Dwight McGlothern's fighting for a spot. I don't know. Did I mention him? He should have been on that list as well. Oscar Chapman. So it's the Super Bowl for some, and it's the only game on for me to watch and cover. So I'm covering it the best I can, and we'll be live streaming after that because I'm not going to Tennessee for the third preseason game. Horror Movies for Life says, when are they going to add wide receivers? Well, that's a good question. I would think that if they're going to do it now, it's going to be after cutdown day. Like we've just sort of, if it's not tomorrow or Thursday, then they'll wait till after cutdown day. Maybe they want to see who gets cut. That could be another part of it too, is if you don't want to trade for Thielen and you don't want to sign Powell and you don't want to sign Amari Cooper, but you might have 10 different guys who, hey, if any of these guys are cut, we'll pick them up. Then, that's the Josh Doxson, that's the Aldrick Robinson type of situations where, at least Aldrick Robinson contributed. He had 5 touchdowns or something? Like he was pretty decent that role in 2018. But that's an example of they waited. Robinson got cut, pick him up at the last minute, bring him in. Hey, buddy, you're a Viking now. Go play. Not the easiest thing in the world, but it can be done. So I would guess if it's not, if we're not getting an announcement tomorrow, the Minnesota Vikings have traded for whoever, then it's probably going to be after cutdown day. So Tim Jones turned 27. Thank you. Yeah, he's experienced. All the guys are experienced more than Ty Felton, and I think that's why we've seen a lot more of those guys with the first team. Eric says, I like Lucky, but I'd still bring in Thielen at this point. If you have to spend a pick or two, worry about 26 picks when the draft comes. Oh, by the way, this reminds me is last night I made an adjustment on the fly to the FanDuel question of the day. So I want to make sure that I get to yesterday's FanDuel question of the day. Justin Jefferson came back to practice yesterday. He right now has the third best odds to win Offensive Player of the Year. Who do you think the biggest threat to Justin Jefferson's candidacy for Offensive Player of the Year is? On FanDuel right now, there are two players that have higher odds. It's Saquon Barkley and Jamar Chase. Those are the only two guys that have higher odds to win Offensive Player of the Year than Justin Jefferson. Who do you think is the biggest threat to him to win Offensive Player of the Year? And one thing I like related is that Offensive Player of the Year has become the best non-quarterback. That's good. When they used to give Offensive Player of the Year to quarterback and MVP, it's like, well, what the heck is the point of that? Just giving the same guy a different award. So I like that now it's a receiver, now it's a running back. Who's the biggest threat? That's the FanDuel question of the day. We'll get to your answers when I get there in the chat, but you guys are kind of on a roll. Let's see. Ryan says this is really in the weeds, but any prediction for the practice squad at offensive tackle? Rouse is probably a roster lock, but no guy behind him appears to be locked in. Now that's a good point. Yeah. You're right, because they have to keep somebody, and Logan Brown has just dropped off the face of the earth. Now, Brown could be a project player. Now, if he goes out in this fourth preseason game, maybe I should have included him. I was thinking about offensive line, but I was like, I think these are all practice squad guys are cut. That's really the guy that I've got my eye on for the best possibility. I mean, outside of that, though, it's not like they have one other tackle, and I'm blanking on his name, and I'm sure some of you know it. But I'm actually going to have to check my roster here with the offensive tackle position, because I focused a lot on Logan Brown, and I thought that Logan Brown was on his way early in the offseason, but it just hasn't gone that way for him. And he has not moved off that third team, and he was playing on the right side today. Leroy Watson is the other tackle. He's 27 years old, but I guess I would go with Leroy Watson right now. The way that they've handled Brown, maybe they just view him as a project. But look, if you get to the practice squad offensive tackle, like the season is in peril, probably at that point. Because, I mean, that means you would have to lose Darisaw, School, and Walter Rouse by the time you got to there. Anthony says biggest pressures on the D-line coach. He has to pull the trigger on UDFA over established guys letting one go. Or letting one guy, sorry, it doesn't look like you completed that thought, but I think I get what you're saying, which is they've got too many good defensive tackles. And if you're the D-line coach and you got to go into that meeting and figure out who you're getting rid of, that's hard to do. I don't think that they can fit 7. Maybe they can. There's kind of a bonus player that's allowed because Jordan Addison has his 3-game suspension. How do you tell Elijah Williams after this camp, hey, buddy, like you're going to go to the practice squad? It's hard to do. Levi Drake Rodriguez had a pretty good start to camp. He's been banged up, missed the joint practices. You're absolutely keeping, I think, I'll say the top 4 guys, Jalen Redmond included. Redmond has become one of the rotation. I think Levi is a little bit more just depth, and I don't think he's going to have a spot in the rotation as much as Jalen Redmond. They're going to rotate those 4 because, I mean, Redmond proved himself last year and has had just a really good camp. So I like where he's at, but You got to keep Ingram Dawkins. He's shown a lot, and you would like to keep Williams. So you're right. If that's what you meant, that's pretty tough. Frank says gut tells me that Brown doesn't make the 53. No, yeah, I mean at this point, definitely not. It's really, do they keep him as part of the practice squad? Son of a Beaver, Xavier Scott was himself a pickup after cutdown day. Oh yeah, he was. Yep, he was, because that was Indianapolis cut him. I think that's right. Connor says, could you build a team out of Vikings media members? No, you couldn't build a team of us for anything. I mean, Ben Gessling is really fast, really, really fast. He is a long distance runner, so he would have to be our deep wide receiver. Maybe Dane could be our underneath guy. I don't think we really have a tight end. I can throw a football okay, but we're best where we're at. Just the other day, for a story that's coming out tomorrow, I had a conversation with Josh Oliver, and I thought to myself, yeah, probably better that I stopped playing football in junior high, because this guy would murder me. So I would never want to be hit by this man. And the people who do get hit by that man have a lot of courage. Rob says, I'd bet Ty Chandler and Xavier Scott don't play on Friday. I think they signed Valladay to back up Stewart. So at least the way that it looked in practice, and I always appreciate when you guys are all the way down to the dude that they just signed right before the last preseason game, but it is interesting to think about. The way that they were doing it in practice today with the third team, I thought was indicative of what they'll do in the game. So that was Brosmer, and Xavier Scott was in the backfield. I want to see Xavier Scott. I don't think that has to necessarily be locked in, and he needs more experience. Even if Xavier Scott makes the team, and even if he's playing on special teams, how many runs is he going to get? I mean, if you're the Vikings, you're hoping the answer is 0, right? Like, you don't want too many runs for Xavier Scott. I don't think you're saving him for anything. You want that guy to get as much experience, as much times touching the football as possible. Let's see. If it's 10 offensive linemen, then Joe Huber. Yeah, Huber has definitely been the guy there. Will they keep 10 offensive linemen? That I would be surprised, but he's played the best in the games. And I prefer to look at the games more than trying to figure it out in practice. I could tell if someone's getting destroyed time in and time out. I could tell if someone's dominating, like just crushing people on the offensive line. The difference between someone having a C+ and a B+ training camp, that's really hard to figure out when you're mostly focusing on JJ McCarthy and the quarterbacks and the receivers. That's why we use the games, I think, weigh pretty heavily. And Huber's been really good. Rob, for 3 spots in the secondary, Makai, Zamaya, Ambry Thomas. Yeah, I don't know if Ambry Thomas is in that mix. Maybe he is. It just hasn't looked that way. Tavier Thomas, the special teamer, if they want to keep one, but now it looks like they're going to keep Jones the way that they've used him. So is he the special teamer? Zach says, love Elijah Williams, but seems like he needs to beat out Taki Taimani and LDR. He could also easily make it to the practice squad. I agree with that. That's where I was talking about earlier that, I think what you want for a guy like that is the story is great. If someone like Elijah Williams from Morgan State, and I asked Brian Flores about that today, and he said that Durante Jones went to Morgan State. That's their secondary coach. And that he kind of recognized Elijah, and then he played really well in that HBCU All-Star game. And what a great story, right? If that guy makes the 53, it's awesome. Just awesome for football. And he's earned it, and he's played great. He's just been so good. And so, if that's the case, well, that would be really, really, Mr. Mankato, the reason we have it, right? That's the reason that the Mr. Mankato exists, is for guys like Elijah Williams. But realistically, if they cut him, it would be very surprising if somebody else grabbed him and put him on the 53, because he's a project and other teams have their own projects that they're working on. They have their own Elijah Williams. We just know who it is because he's here. So I tend to agree with you. Taki is the guy that he has just looked like the odd man out. He made a couple plays the other day, but he has not gotten a lot of work. I mean, maybe he'll be on the practice squad as well. Levi Drake Rodriguez is the interesting one that if he's injured, that does open the door because he is banged up right now. Rob says Wright versus Chapman. Totally agree. Wright versus Chapman is the biggest head to head. So the question then is, does Ryan Wright play in this, or is it a punt off, or is it going to be mostly Oscar Chapman just getting his chance and trying to prove himself? I'm curious about that. Let's see. First name, last name, late and getting caught up, unacceptable. You're either 10 minutes early or 10 minutes late. You got to be one of the people who when I turn this on and I hit the test responds back to me. Test. I'm just kidding. Anyway, does it sound like the team is considering Brosmer for QB2, or are they just prepping him to play the full game? I don't know that he's going to play the full game. I think he's going to play a lot. It was interesting, though, to have Brosmer be the only guy out there that was taking some real reps today and doing an 11-on-11 full drive. Nobody else did that today, just Brosmer in that unit. So they wanted to prepare him for something. I'm not really 100% sure what that was. I don't think that he's QB2 or a part of the QB2 discussion. I think it's Howell versus Howell. And with Rippon, I mean, we'll see. If Rippon starts the season as QB2, I guess I wouldn't be that shocked based on he's been here for a year and he knows the offense extremely well. He's limited in his physical ability, but at least he could run the offense and he gets the ball out of his hands. It's not accurate all the time, but at least he gets the ball out of his hands and he's not just back there throwing the ball up in the air or taking sacks or trying to be a playmaker. I'm just, I respect the Nick Mullenses, the Ryan Fitzpatricks, who, when they get in the game, the Jameis Winstons, they are going to just try to ball out, try to be the best version of themselves. They're going to be John Elway out there. Is that what you really want out of your backup, though? I don't think so. I think what you want out of your backup is to keep the train on the track. So if I was me, if it's really truly open, as Kevin O'Connell said, I'm playing all these guys, and I'd probably give Brosmer the second half again. That's great experience. For a QB4, there have been years, guys, where the QB4 doesn't even play. Like it shows you how they feel about Brosmer that they're trying to get him this much work, but I don't think he is QB2. Dr. Smug says Mekhi has not looked real good, but he's most likely the nickel number 2. Yeah, he's not, as far as him being on my under pressure list, he is not under pressure to make the roster so much as he's under pressure for us to feel any confidence in him if they need to put him in the game. He is definitely the backup nickel for Byron Murphy if he were to go out. It might be Zamiah Vaughn, who's supposed to be the Jeff Okudah, if he were to go out. I think McGlothern also hasn't shown a whole lot outside of a couple days where he got some interceptions. If Oscar Chapman is the punter, do we get a 54-man roster? No, unfortunately, you can't use the Australian to cheat the roster rules. You actually get 54 because of Jordan Addison's suspension, though. So there is a bonus player, but it can't be Oscar Chapman. If he makes the roster, then he just takes up a roster spot. You can get an extra practice squad player, though. That's where he would not count. Let's see. Sean says, how has Chapman's targeting been? Is he hitting within 20 yards? So here's the thing with the punting. You guys have seen the same punting as me. In practice, it's just practice. Those guys are punting on their own a lot, and those guys are doing a handful of drills that I've seen all summer long. But when it comes to the punting, it's the games. The games is what's going to matter the most. And to me, Chapman's been the better punter so far. And what I really have kind of enjoyed is when he punts it up there and the returner's like, where's it going? What's going on here? And there's just that moment of terror that you can sense even from up in the press box that the guy I don't know where it's going. And that's even indoors. But he got a good bounce on one of them. I mean, there's only been a couple punts. Like maybe this game will provide a decent amount of punts for them to get a closer look at Oscar Chapman. The fact that he's still here, well, no, because they can keep him on the practice squad. If I had to guess, he would have to be great in this game. And as far as his coffin corner ability, that's what's going to separate him, is if they feel like Chapman can cause more problems for the opponent by putting it inside the 10, where Ryan Wright is that big leg guy who doesn't have the same level of touch. That's the difference maker for the punting competition. Yes. Can I tell that in a couple of practice segments and so far in their opportunities in the preseason? I can't tell that yet. It's just looked like, because now let's just get into this. I mean, we've been talking about backup offensive line. This is like peak preseason. So let's just get into this. I asked Matt Daniels one time about just the idea of evaluating punters, because I think all of us, I know I did this. I mentioned Madden. I just signed the punter with the highest power. I don't know what you guys did. And then I never punted anyway, but that was the guy who was, just in case it was 4th and 37 at my own one and I had to punt it away. I still might have gone for that anyway, but just in case I had a punter and he would have like 98 power and I didn't care about anything else. That is not, shockingly, how football really works. And what a disappointment it was to find that out. But how it really works is there are certain trajectories that they want to see of the ball and then landing spots that the coverage is based around. So think about it as in, like, outside of the hashes, 50 yards from the line of scrimmage is where you're aiming to put the ball, but you're supposed to kick it at a certain trajectory that gives your guys enough time to get there. That's where the out kick your coverage comes in, and that phrase where if you hit it 2-line drive, then it gets it to the guy faster. But if you hit it too far up, then it like, you get this, right? You guys have seen punts, like, you understand how this works, but they really organize the plays and the coverage to spots on the field. So it's not just inside the 20, but it's who can hit those spots consistently to help the coverage. I don't know that that's really been Ryan Wright. Kit says, I see some pressure on Dwight McGlothern. Seems like Flores hasn't been thrilled. Right. When his name has come up this year, it's been very different than it was last year. Last year, they were like, yeah, I love that guy, and he's making plays left and right. But this year, it's been, oh, yeah, he's on the team. Yeah, well, he's got to keep working. I just think that he's somebody that plays to try to get the ball, and that is not, I mean, this is a defense where they try to take it away, but there is a very fine line when it comes to that you can't just, play the ball all the time and then give up big receptions. Clark says, any interest in Romeo Doubs if he is cut? Yeah. I think that there are going to be 10 wide receivers that get cut where you go, oh, yeah, well, okay, maybe. And that's probably what they're waiting for, unless we get the Adam Thielen trade tomorrow. Then that'll be a really fun podcast. Sloth says that I am under the most pressure to go 53 for 53 and at least 13 for 16 on the practice squad. I actually bet that I would be better at getting the practice squad right than the 53, because the 53 just has other considerations that I don't think of, like who they think they can get through or who's going to go on IR or, whatever else. The practice squad, though, there's so many spots now. Just pick everybody who's played it all. Like everybody who gets cut that you sort of like probably in the practice squad, I'm guessing. I've never gone 53 for 53. I have never picked a Super Bowl champion correctly. And honestly, I've definitely never won a fantasy championship. So shout out FanDuel. Maybe the FanDuel will inspire me this year, but I've never had that, never had that happen for me. Let's see. At some point, Maggie Robinson will be popping in. I was kind of hoping to get to your FanDuel question of the day answers. Ike says, I need Euro. We have the meats. I assume you mean Eurosec. But he is kind of a blocker. He is kind of a blocker guy. And if that's the case, then that's enough. Son of Beavers, I've heard enough of bring back Cordero Patterson. Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, if Cordero still had it, he would be on a team right now. Let's see. Demand Dice. Does anybody have score prediction? Vikings versus Bears week 1. Don't get too far ahead of ourselves. We'll get there 1 week at a time. Let's get to cut down week and this Super Bowl of a third preseason game with so much on the line. And then we'll get to who's going to win when it comes to the Bears. I mean, I think that we all think that the Vikings are the better team, but it is Soldier Field. Brian says, how about a pie chart of end of the season total receptions for Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson, and whoever is fourth? I think, do I get to use Aaron Jones for whoever is fourth? Because I'm pretty sure it's going to be Aaron Jones. I will go with 102 for Justin Jefferson, 71 for Jordan Addison, 84 for TJ Hawkinson, and whoever is fourth probably with, if you're talking about, let's just throw out the running back. So I would have gone like 45 for Aaron Jones. But if you're just talking wide receivers, then I would say Jalen Naylor will be the next with maybe 36. And maybe that's not really a pie chart, but that's a hard thing to pie chart. I don't even know how to pie chart that, but just taking a swing at it. That's how I could see it breaking down, is the typical way that you would expect is Jefferson is the main target, gets 150 targets. That's what he had last year. That's what he should always be getting. Addison gets a little more underneath stuff. Last year was all downfield. Naylor steps up a little bit in those first couple of weeks, and Hawkinson is just, underneath. And someone will have to add those up and then tell me, like, yeah, you just had JJ McCarthy completing, 700 passes or something. But I think those are all reasonable numbers for those guys and what I would expect. I think the actual reception numbers might go up from last year for some guys because I don't think they're going to be pushing it down the field quite as much. Some of you did take a shot at making those into percentages. That is too much math for me. That is too much math. All right, let's see here. Clark says, Brosmer took the important reps today. Howell, the least important. Thoughts? Well, you want to see more Max Brosmer, and I imagine they're prepping him to play a lot more than the other guys. So that would be my reasoning for why Brosmer would get that one drill and not the other guys. I don't think that we can really figure this out just yet. But if they need more information on Sam Howell, I just don't know what you need more. We've seen the whole picture of Sam Howell. We saw, in that first preseason game, like he can actually play quarterback a little. That's why he's here. That's why he's in the league. And we can't discount that. That was good. And then the second one was, that's who you were in Washington, where it was one game or one half or one quarter where he was pretty good and he took some risks and he threw it downfield and made some plays with his legs. And then you had the other half, which was throwing interceptions and getting sacked constantly. That's who you have in Sam Howell. You should know by now who you have in Brett Rippon. There's really one guy who you don't fully know what you have, and that's Max Brosmer. Let's see. Jim is very deep in the weeds and wants Mitchell Tinsley. I did see that Joe Burrow say that he thinks Tinsley's done enough to be on the roster? I think he did. You're right, Rob, that Patrick Peterson was a really, really good golfer. He could do anything, absolutely anything. Really, really just amazing athlete. Aaron is LDR on the bubble, or did he have a good enough camp to make the team? I would have had Levi Drake, or I have on all of my 53s. I've had him on the roster. He had a good training camp, but he got banged up before the joint practices, which I thought were going to be the most important for him. But overall, he definitely had a good enough camp to be on the team. I don't think he's somewhat of a bubble guy, but I think he did enough to at least make a case for being as part of a rotation. It's Redmond. I think there's a gap. Redmond and then Levi Drake, but Levi Drake took big steps forward, continuing to develop somebody you could definitely put in the game. Overall, pretty good. Andrew says maybe wide receiver isn't a need. We have depth on the team in case of emergency. It's just that none of the depth players have resumes to suggest that you're in good shape with them on the field. And none of them have really done anything in the preseason games to change my mind on that. With someone like Lucky Jackson, I thought he had a good first preseason game and then a miserable second preseason game. we're talking about guys who are 27 and have never played in games before. That's where we get to the point where you're talking about being concerned about the in case of emergency type of thing, is when you have no sample size, and in training camp and preseason, nobody has jumped out and said, look at me, I need to be wide receiver 4. I thought it was probably going to be Rondale Moore eventually, but he ended up getting hurt. Crown Brosmer, Mr. Mankato. Yeah, I mean, Brosmer, it is kind of a classic Mr. Mankato. The fact that he was a Gopher, it really is ready-made. Jake, has there been any milkshake bets? No, Alec Lewis and I might have had one. Well, actually, we might have had one. Yeah, I think we had on some wide receiver total of receptions, but I haven't followed up on what that was. It's gotten a little lost, the milkshake bets. Alec is down a couple to me over the last year, so I think he's maybe stopped playing. Sky Moore might get cut. Yeah, these just aren't inspiring ideas. Jag, just a guy maybe. Let's see. Says, do you think that they're playing the waiting game for someone to get cut from a team with a similar scheme like the Bucks or the Rams? I think that it's twofold with the wide receivers, that they're both waiting for someone to get cut and or waiting to see who gets cut just in general, and also giving these guys another practice tomorrow and another preseason game just to have the full picture, and they can look at all of their grades for how they've evaluated these guys throughout the training camp period, and they can make that decision. And figure out, like, they can compare and contrast. Do they want this guy or that guy, or should they just stick with what they've got? Mr. Mayor, how does the August 2025 room compare to August 2024 cornerback room? Is it more or less dire? Well, the reason it's less dire is because Justin Jefferson is there. I mean, Byron Murphy was there last year. Justin Jefferson, I like Murphy a ton, and so does this team, but, Justin Jefferson's the top 5 player in the whole league. So it's not quite that. And Jordan Addison will come back. With the corners, there wasn't somebody who was just coming back. Jordan Addison, if he plays 14 games, you're going to feel pretty darn good about that and where you stand as having a top 3 duo in the entire league. The corner was much more dire last year. Also, Josh Oliver and Aaron Jones, if you're talking about how the targets are going to be distributed, let's say Naylor's back and Lucky Jackson's got to be wide receiver 3. Well, you're going to throw the ball 10 times a game to Justin Jefferson. You're going to get 8 to 12 more to TJ Hawkinson. You're going to get 5 throws to Aaron Jones out of the backfield. You're going to hit Jalen Naylor with 1 or 2 and Josh Oliver with 1 or 2. I mean, at that point, that's a whole game's worth of throws, and you haven't even looked at this wide receiver. Where the concern would be for me is, well, number one, I mean, if someone gets banged up, if Justin Jefferson had to go out for a quarter, like, who are you playing? And the other thing is that if Naylor goes into this banged up, and I don't think he's had the greatest camp from an actual catching of the ball perspective. He's had quite a few drops in this camp. If he's got an issue with the hand and then he's going into the season, you might need somebody else just if that hand isn't in good shape. Sean says, wonder if the Vikings run a lot of 2 or 3 tight ends with a wide receiver banged up. 2, yes. 3, I'd be quite surprised. Josh Oliver's going to play a lot. Emergency podcast. Don't threaten us with a good time. Yeah, well, we'll see. It's always determined by them and not me. Every day is an emergency here when we get to talk about the 5th or 6th wide receivers, 3rd tight ends. Dr. Smug says Zamiah has to make the team, right? Oh, yeah, Zamiah Vaughn, I think, will very much be on the team. Clark says, is Gilmore still in play if not happy with the cornerback depth? I have not heard a thing about Stephon Gilmore. I think that he would probably, if I had to totally guess, then I would say that he is probably waiting for a team to get a corner hurt who's a contender, or he might be somebody that joins a team week 6, gets their cornerback room. Let's say it's Kansas City, gets their cornerback room banged up and he joins. But Gilmore, I mean, he's won an MVP. He's played a lot of football. He was on a great team last year and a great defense. I mean, that guy doesn't need to really add anything more to his resume. FanDuel question of the day answers, now that I've arrived in the chat. Jamar Chase is probably the best one. This is a good answer from Slide to Play. Justin Jefferson's hamstring is the biggest threat. Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't know about Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs kind of strikes me as a regression candidate. Like when you average 5.5 to 6 yards a carry, usually you don't do it again the next year. So maybe. Who is right below Jefferson in the odds? I'm going to have to get out my FanDuel app and take a look here. I actually don't know the answer to that. That's a good question. If I had to guess, I would go Derrick Henry. Let's see if I can figure that out. The best odds for offense. Let's see who's next. One moment, everyone, while I figure this out. Rookie of the year. Vikings aren't in that one. Offensive player of the year. Oh, it's Gibbs. It is Gibbs. It's Gibbs. And here's a weird one. Gibbs, Henry, and Bijan Robinson. What has Bijan Robinson done? I mean, I think he's good, but what has he done to belong in this conversation? Who else? Let me look who else. Nico Collins. It's kind of interesting. Puka Nacua, CD Lamb, Christian McCaffrey, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Brian Thomas would be, if you're talking about making a bet, Brian Thomas is plus 3,500. What if he ends up with like 120 catches because he's the only guy in the team? Devin Achane, Tyreek Hill, no chance there. Drake London, AJ Brown, not going to happen. I mean, you get quite a bit down there. There's probably 5 to 7 guys who are legitimate contenders along with Jefferson for our FanDuel question of the day. Troy thinks that Jefferson won't get as many catches. See, I think that Jefferson is just quarterback proof. The offense is so much centered around him. Healthy Christian McCaffrey, Jahmyr Gibbs, yeah, those are good. Those are good answers for. Jag said that thinks that Bijan Robinson could be in that mix. I suppose if he takes a big jump, then he could be. If Gibbs didn't share carries with Montgomery, that's true. That's definitely true. Let's see. Jag says, how much do you think Ingram Dawkins rotates this year? I'm going to go with almost none. I think he's made a great first impression and he's had a really good camp. Best case scenario. But this is not a team to try people out. Like this is a team that you're not playing him unless guys get hurt. If everybody's healthy, then you're playing the dudes. You're playing. I mean, he could get a little bit, but when you think about Allen and Hargrave and Phillips and Redmond, like those guys are going to play the most. But a really good development camp for him. I think that's a good thing for their draft pick. Steelers might cut Darnell Washington. Yes, you're right. That is a huge human being. Jim says Joe Huber has been versatile and reliable. What else do you want? Well, I don't need anything else from Joe Huber. He just strikes me as a guy you could easily get to the practice squad. Lore, compare JJ's camp to last year. Has he improved or he's the same? Oh, he's much better. He's much better this year in training camp. The degree of difficulty is much harder. I mean, last year he did match up with the ones sometimes as part of the twos, but leading and commanding a franchise as QB1 in training camp and joint practices is much more challenging than being the development quarterback because you're taking on everything. And he hasn't had Jefferson. I mean, that's also made this camp impressive for JJ McCarthy and also harder to evaluate. But, we mentioned Judd Zulgad. He and a bunch of us have been writing down every throw throughout the year of training camp. And, he's been somewhere in the ballpark of completing 7 out of every 10 passes. Remember at Bears camp when they said Caleb Williams was only hitting 50 something percent. So he's had a good camp. He's grown a ton. The biggest thing is that he's in command of a bunch of dudes who are here to try to win. I mean, Addison is one of them for sure, but like Ryan Kelly, Brian O'Neill, TJ Hawkinson, these guys are star players in their primes and they're all looking at him. And I think he's done a really good job commanding the offense. And that's going to get you far. You can make inaccurate throws. You can be up and down, but if you're not in command, you are in trouble. And just to tell you how all this stuff is not a bit when it comes to like me spending my whole life just like watching football and stuff. last night I was watching the 2003 opener with Al Michaels and John Madden calling Washington versus the New York Jets. And Patrick Ramsey was the quarterback for Washington, a bust for Washington. And even though Ramsey made some good throws and had a strong arm, he was just not, he didn't look in command of the offense. And I thought, you know, you don't have, but he's facing Vinny Testaverde. And so, like, there you go. Like, the OG is playing better because he's in command of the offense. They're talking about, Vinny, and he's 41 years old and he's got nothing left in the tank and, that sort of thing. It's like, that's the biggest thing as McCarthy has looked in control. He looks like he knows where the ball's supposed to go. He's been decisive with the football. Like, those things are the most important. Last year, he started to come along with all that and was getting to a point where he was interesting. But now it's not about being interesting. It's not about developing. It's like being the dude. That's a lot more pressure to take on. And I think he overall has done a very good job with it. I did get a lot of response about last night. Beware of the vicious hound behind me. Yes, the threatening greyhound here, who is right below me. He's become my good partner for live streaming down here. But I got a lot of comments last night on the discussion with Mike Sando. And, I saw there was some people that put it out there, and made web posts about it, things like that, about what Sando said with JJ McCarthy. And what I'm going to keep going back to is there's been a little bit of this kind of hinting of, was the team not sold on something that was going on behind the scenes that they knew that everybody else didn't know? And the way I interpret what was happening was, JJ McCarthy had two different procedures on his knee, one, the major surgery, and then another procedure. He lost a bunch of weight. He went through something that's very traumatic at his age to go through. And of course they would want to see him in an OTAs or however long they could wait to just see where he was at. And then they decided to go with him. I don't think that that's salacious. I don't think it's controversial. I think it was just the right thing to do, because who among us would have been sure that he would be back up to weight? I know I questioned that, which, he clearly is now and is in good shape now. But when you see somebody on the sideline who looked like that, you would wonder, is he going to be good to go? Is he going to be good to be QB1? So I think that there's maybe a little bit of a disconnect for the way I view it, which is all of this was pretty normal process. You have to consider all your options. You would certainly have questions about how the guy's recovery is gone and whether he is going to get himself prepared, and that would impact your decision of whether to go with them or not. And then they went with him and they rejected other really good ideas because they believed in it. And I don't think that there's not some super secret other thing to this story. And it feels like some other people think that. I think that they landed on the place that they always thought they were going to land. And the road bump was just McCarthy and his recovery and how that went. And being as sure as they could be after OTAs and workouts that he was going to be good to go. And once he was, they said no to Aaron Rodgers and moved on. None of that sounds crazy to me. So I don't know. To some people, that's been made a little bit more than I think it was, but that's just my viewpoint. Sando is very well connected, and I thought some of the comments were a little on the disrespectful side to him. He's a great journalist who I look up to, and that's why I wanted him on the show. He's great, and he's given me his perspective. I'm giving him mine, and we're going back and forth on it, which is totally fine with me. I don't need every single interview to have every single person who I'm talking to be like, I agree with you, you're the best. Like, that would be boring. So it wasn't boring. It was an interesting conversation. But as far as how far JJ's come along, I think he has made leaps and bounds better from where he was last year. And I thought he was coming along last year. Let's see. I should probably let this Greyhound out. So this seems like a good time to bring you the Robinson Roundtable. And before I bring you Maggie's segment, and I'll pop back in after that, remember, the FanDuel question of the day is, Justin Jefferson has the third best odds to win Offensive Player of the Year on FanDuel, and only two players have higher, Saquon Barkley and Jamar Chase. Who else is the biggest threat, or one of those two? Who is the biggest threat to Justin Jefferson for Offensive Player of the Year? And I think I got maybe distracted midway through talking about Jefferson and whether he'll get the same number of targets. I just think the way the offense is constructed, it can't be him having way less. If it is, then something has gone very wrong for JJ McCarthy. So even if it goes from 100 and whatever to 97 or 90 catches, that's still a very good season. Or maybe if they throw less, that means that they've played in games that they're ahead. That would also be something that's possible, that they're playing a little more conservatively. So maybe, but in terms of like, does he have a chance? I think he enters every season with a chance to win Offensive Player of the Year. So make sure you answer that. And I just want to say that at the beginning of my conversation with Maggie, there's an announcement there, and she makes a joke about her not getting a raise from Purple Insider. It's been a paid internship. I'm just going to point that out. So anyway, the Robinson Rundown with Maggie Robinson, where we look around the league at some of the headlines of today. Here it is. All right, we welcome back into the show Maggie Robinson, who has now a title change at Purple Insider. Maggie has been intern Maggie Robinson, but now we are making Maggie special contributor because our plan is to have Maggie continue to contribute not only with her updates from around the league and our conversations, but as well as some interviews as well of her own to Purple Insider. So you've done an amazing job, Maggie, at contributing to Purple Insider. Now that is your title. It doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot other than you're not intern anymore. So congratulations on that. Where would you like to start our conversation today?
Thank you, Matthew. I appreciate the promotion, even if it's just in title. There is no monetary increase here. However, I am excited to lead off the rundown with Robinson once again this Tuesday. I want to start with our very own Anthony Richardson and his dislocated right pinky, who will now be warming left bench for the Colts this season. He has been beat out by Daniel Jones as the starter for the Colts. And let me say, Shane Steichen has made it clear, this is not just a week one start. This is an indefinite start. He said, I don't want to put a timeline on this. He's the starter for as long as he will be. That's a statement.
It is, and I think it says a lot about the lack of development for Anthony Richardson. And I'm really of two minds when it comes to this, because in one way, I think that Anthony Richardson was always a huge project when he came out, and everybody knew that, and everybody said that, and yet they got him in the building. They were like, ooh, man, he throws it hard. He's fast. Let's just have him start, even though he's not ready. And then he gets injured, and then it's very hard to get better off the field if you are injured all the time. And then he comes back last year, looked like he regressed, got hurt again, got benched. There goes the confidence. So I think a lot of people will reasonably point the finger at the Colts for not following the plan that should have been laid out for him when he was drafted. At the same time, I remember asking Kirk Cousins about development one time, and his answer was, in the NFL, you got to develop yourself. If you're a quarterback, you have to be the one, because you are mostly away from the facility. That you show up to work for practice, and that's where the coaches teach you. They implement game plans, but they're not adjusting your throwing motion at the team facility. Usually you hire a quarterback guru, you work off the field, and that's how you get better at throwing the football. And it's clear that Richardson has not come far enough in doing that away from the facility. And maybe that could be in part just because of some of the injuries, or there is another part, which is maybe it was just never going to happen. He's a great athlete, and there was always just, hey, Lamar Jackson figured it out, and Jalen Hurts improved, and there's a number of other guys. Josh Allen, of course, the most obvious example, but not everybody is Lamar, and not everybody is Josh, and some people are just Tim Tebow. And that's kind of what Anthony Richardson has looked like so far in the NFL. I don't think that that throwing motion is going to happen anytime soon, but after seeing Sam Darnold and his turnaround after how much he struggled early, I think maybe someday we see Anthony get another shot again, likely somewhere else. But unless there is a major turnaround that happens midseason and Daniel Jones struggles and then he comes in, I think this might be the end of Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis.
I agree with that. And I think, like you were saying, he was so overhyped in general, coming through the whole draft process, looking at him. The guy didn't play much in high school or in college. I think we overlook that and we're like, but he's 6'4, 254 pounds. Like, he's awesome. He's a unit. That's great. But if you don't have the mental drive and the determination that you're talking about to actually want to get better and not just rely on your physicality, you're not going to succeed in the NFL. You can't go that far on just your build once it gets to this level. And especially at quarterback, you get exposed so fast. And that's exactly what's happened. So, yeah, I think he's kind of destined for this backup quarterback role now. I wish him all the best, but that attitude paired with this injury issue is just a bad combo.
I made the Tim Tebow reference, but it also could be Trey Lance, where it just seems that the evaluation was based on the highest upside.
Mhm.
And sometimes it doesn't work out and the guy doesn't figure out all those other things. But you make a great point that for Richardson, as much as he had this explosion onto the scene in Florida and showed off the arm strength, the speed, and all those things, and had some truly incredible plays when he was with Florida, you have to wonder if he had played another college season or two instead of coming out at, I think he was still 20 years old, if
He was
he had
young.
played another, whether it would have gone one way or the other, because Jaden Daniels, when he was Anthony Richardson's age, was in college throwing like 16 touchdowns and then figured it out in college. And I always think it's better, more development, more reps, more playing. But if you're going to get hurt at the NFL level, then you don't get any of that stuff. And I still think because of his age, if you look, he's actually younger than a lot of young NFL quarterbacks, including some guys that are rookies this year, which is
Wow.
really crazy to think about. So I don't want to say that Anthony Richardson's career is over today because he was benched
Mm.
or loses the job in training camp to Daniel Jones. It's just that it's a long road from here. And we're really going to find out how much Anthony Richardson wants it, because Sam Darnold, I always gave him credit for just fighting through and continuing to battle in the NFL and taking on a backup role when he had to and figuring it out. Then in Minnesota, it might take eventually just the right place, the right couple of years as a number two quarterback. Is he willing to do it or not? I think we're going to find that out next from Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the flip side of this, still kind of interconnected, the Browns just named Joe Flacco for their starter week 1 when they host the Bengals on September 7th. This is unsurprising. Unfortunately, it was just the only logical option for this quarterback room. But he's the second oldest starting quarterback behind Aaron Rodgers, who is 41. Obviously, the most experienced in that room. Won a Super Bowl, mind you, 12 years ago, and then was Super Bowl MVP. Had his heyday, had kids, came back, yawned on the bench, and now is a starter. So I don't know. I think it is logical for the Browns, yes, but is it the very best option of quarterbacks in this division? Absolutely not.
No, it might be 31 out of 32 in the NFL, which we're going to talk about the team we think is probably 32 shortly. If you're the Browns, the only thing you can hang on to for hope is that Joe Flacco did make the playoffs with the Browns a couple years ago, came out of, I don't know if I wouldn't call it retirement, but he wasn't with the team. So off his couch and then ends up winning comeback player of the year, even though
Mhm.
he argued against himself winning that award. Nonetheless, he did enough, got the ball to the right places. They ran well, they played defense, and was able to get them to the playoffs. And we've also seen the Pittsburgh Steelers do similar things where they had Duck Hodges have a winning season. They've gotten Kenny Pickett to win them games. Like, it's not impossible to grind your way to 9 wins and find a way into the postseason. But as you mentioned, in that division, seems virtually impossible. Really, the question for me about this is not how Joe Flacco is going to play. I think I got a pretty good sense for that. It's how long is Joe Flacco going to
Mm.
be the starting quarterback? How long, like how many games until they say, okay, we have to play Shadur Sanders now, or we have to play Dylan Gabriel because somebody else just has got to get work and get into the game, rather than having a 40-year-old quarterback go out there and lose over and over again, which I kind of think is what's going to happen.
Who in your mind is that first person off the bench then?
See, this is hard because I don't know how they really feel about Shador Sanders. He
Mhm.
played a single preseason game. A lot of people decided that he was the next great NFL quarterback after he threw for 130 yards or something. And then he had an injury, which is not really a great situation for him either. Dylan Gabriel didn't do much special when he got into a preseason game. So, what have they seen behind the scenes? And will they keep Kenny Pickett? I mean, that's of interest, I think, to the Minnesota Vikings because what is the use of Kenny Pickett on your roster when you have two guys that you drafted this year who would be much better options to play? For me, I liked Dylan Gabriel. I kind of became like a Dylan Gabriel truther a little bit because I think he's got a legit arm, even though he's very short. But I mean, let's be honest. I think Shadur is probably the guy that has the higher ceiling.
Mm.
So they should go with him probably, or just like they're going to be around him every day, whichever guy is performing better in practice. And Mike Zimmer once said about Kellen Mond, I see him in practice every day as a reason to not play him. The coaches know. The coaches
They
know
do.
which guy is farther along. So whichever one has impressed more behind the scenes, they will be going to them. Do you want to make a prediction? I will go. Well, you make a prediction first. When do they go to someone else that isn't Joe Flacco? What week?
Ooh, what week? I think week 5, week 6, those are great determiners. You can play a solid run through there. And to be candid, I'm not entirely sure what their starting season looks like, but I think week 5 or 6, he's gotten a little banged up. He said in a quote that he gets kind of tricked and feels like he's still in his 20s, he being Joe Flacco. That's not exactly what I want to hear this guy who's 40 saying. It's like sometimes I forget how old I am and I think I'm so spry. Pump the brakes, guy. You're not.
Well,
Okay.
I'm the same age and I never have that happen. I just took a nap. So yeah, I think I like your I was gonna go week 6. I think
Yeah.
week 6 because week 6 is enough time to be 2-4
Right.
or 1-5. And you're just going, there's no way that we could come back from this. You're starting to sell off at the trade deadline, and then you're going to your other quarterbacks to just see if you've got anything there. They also need a big enough sample to if they want to
Mhm.
try both quarterbacks. I don't even think for the franchise it's a bad thing if they played Flacco for the first 6 weeks and then gave Gabriel another 6 weeks and then 5 weeks to Sanders or whatever. It's a circus there anyway. What difference does it make? But see what you've got in those quarterbacks. I think that's what's going to happen soon. But shout out to Joe Flacco for all those hovering around 40. A hero. As long as there's an NFL player older than me in the league that's not a long snapper, I am not yet old.
We'll hold you to that. I'm gonna keep a tally.
Okay, but I will let me throw this out there just to be old. Kind of reminds me of Vinny Testaverde playing quarterback in '03 at age 41 for the Jets. Okay, move on. Move on.
I was guess how old I was in '03?
One,
3
four,
years
three.
old.
Okay.
Okay, anyways, let's go to my home state of Tennessee with the Tennessee Titans and Cam Ward. There's a little bit of a scuffle in practice. No one caught this, surprisingly, on video. However, Cam Ward threw a touchdown pass to Calvin Ridley on his way there, kind of shoved DT Jeffrey Simmons in the back, and then did his typical Zombieland celebration, if you will. Jeffrey Simmons did not like that. Two hands shoved Cam Ward in the face on the face mask, and a fight ensued on the practice field. So this is a little chippy, but everyone who's come out and talked about this has said, you know what, it's good. It shows that the guys are passionate. If you're not bringing that energy to practice, how are you going to bring it to a game? No one seemed that worried about it. They did run after practice. So that happened, got some more eyeballs on the Tennessee Titans, but it does beg the question, what does a successful season for Cam Ward look like this year? Because the Titans are trash. And I will
No
say
doubt.
that as a Tennessean with my chest, as much as it pains me, they are not good. This is a rebuild year, but it's also been a rebuild year for the past like 8 years. So, I think it's a tough road ahead for him.
It probably is going to be a very tough road ahead for Cam Ward. I mean, just looking at his wide receiving group and I don't know who he's supposed to throw to. He looks to me, just watching him a little bit in preseason, he looks pretty fearless back there. He looks pretty confident, a little bit on the cocky side, which I think is good. And he is going to need every ounce of that confidence as he goes through the whooping that the NFL is probably going to put on him. But I like the fact that he wasn't afraid to go after Jeffrey Simmons because let me tell you, I've seen Jeffrey Simmons up close. And I am very afraid of Jeffrey Simmons. And you know who else is? The Vikings had joint practices and they played them last year. the Vikings are also afraid of Jeffrey Simmons. He is, look, if they're mad at him for this fight, they should trade him to the Vikings for next year's first or something. He's a great player and a very violent, aggressive dude who probably felt like, I'm not going to let no little guy pick on me. But stuff like this does happen. The Vikings quarterback, JJ McCarthy, shoved a defensive lineman himself at one point for tackling Aaron Jones a little too hard. It was one of the highlights of training camp, actually. We were like, oh, JJ McCarthy's got that dog in him, you know? So stuff like this does happen. Cam Newton, I think, got in a fight with Josh Norman one time. It's not totally unprecedented, but I think it does sort of highlight what a difficult year it is going to be for Cam Ward because he doesn't have much to work with. The franchise is pretty down bad. And the best that they can hope for as far as a successful season, like what's a success for Cam Ward? I think about Joe Burrow's 2020 as like what could be a success. Joe Burrow had nothing in Cincinnati in his rookie year, and he just fought and battled, and he threw some touchdowns, and he took some hits, and he kept them in games just by being Joe Burrow. And even though his record wasn't good and his stats weren't great, you could see the signs of if they get this guy anything, then he'll be pretty good. You want to see the same thing from Cam Ward. If he fights his way to 6 wins with this team, I'll be pretty impressed because I think that they're as empty with talent as there exists in the league.
I agree. They were 3-14 last season. So the bar is under the ground. It's non-existent essentially. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's going to be a lot about his mentality and how he approaches every game and not letting all of the sacks that he's going to get hit with, like not letting all the things kind of compile and get him down. I think if he can keep up with the speed of NFL play, if he can limit his interceptions and just do his own personal best. I hate to single a guy out and make him more important than a team, but I think for Cam Ward and his trajectory, if he just focuses on himself this year, that's all he can do because the team is going to be the team. It's kind of out of his control, but he's just going to have to focus on what he can deliver, what he can control, and then let the chips fall where they may.
And they just need to hope. And he's played way more football than Anthony Richardson, so there's no correlation there. He, I think, is like 2 years older than Anthony Richardson right now. But I think they just need to hope that he can stay healthy behind their offensive line and not have injury setbacks that take him off the field and then feel like they got to ramp him up again for next year. Question before you move on to your next topic. Who was, if you were 3 in 2003, then who was the first Titans quarterback you remember? Because you would not remember Steve McNair then.
I was going to say the name McNair because I would hear it a lot, but
Kerry Collins, maybe Billy Volek.
I don't know any of those names. It's so exposing of me. I would watch the Titans on a Sunday with my dad on the couch, but I would just like zone out. Like it was something to watch and it was like nap background noise. You know what I'm saying?
I'm going to guess that it was Kerry Collins was probably the first one you would have seen.
Okay.
Growing up in Tennessee, because the 2008 Tennessee Titans went 13-3 with Kerry Collins. Oh, I know there's a better answer to this. I'm silly for forgetting this. It should be Vince Young, right?
Oh,
Would it have been Vince Young?
It is Vince Young. I couldn't pull that name off the top of my head, but it's Vince Young.
Yep. Well, there's a reason for that because he was Anthony Richardson, basically. He was Anthony Richardson with an elite defense and he won some games. They put him on a Madden cover and it never worked out. Actually, really similar kind of arc where there were moments where you went, whoa, I think he's good. And then he made a Pro Bowl with, I think, more interceptions than touchdowns. But reason, of course, my brain went to the journeyman, Kerry Collins, because he went 13-3 that one year for the Titans. But yes, Vince Young makes sense as your first Titans quarterback.
That was a good pull. It is definitely Vince Young. Speaking of quarterbacks, let's look at the New Orleans Saints, who still don't have. Unfortunately, this is like watching a train wreck happen. They still don't have a starting quarterback. Kellen Moore said, quote, "We'll see," when asked who he wants to put for week 1. That doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in me personally. And I guess the question is, will another team be worse than the Saints this season?
Yeah. I mean, they drafted a quarterback in the second round. And if he hasn't won the job over Spencer Rattler, Tyler Shook, then I mean, that's not a great scene right there. Are they waiting? This happened in Arizona. I think last year, Arizona picked up Josh Dobbs late in the offseason and started him. Are they waiting for Tommy DeVito or something? I saw the Giants are not going to move on from Jameis Winston. I don't know what they're supposed to do at this point. Spencer Rattler to me is just a backup type of
Yep.
quarterback. And we saw that last year. I don't think the physical tools are there to elevate from where he's at. He's also not that young. And I don't know a lot about Tyler Shook. I didn't watch any of him in college. I wasn't looking at quarterbacks much this year. But if he can't beat out Rattler, that's not the highest bar ever. So the question, can anybody be worse than the New Orleans Saints? And my answer is no, I don't think they can, because it's not just the quarterback situation. Because we went through how, like, hey, the Browns that one time and the Pittsburgh, you go through this roster, they don't have an offensive line. Alvin Kamara's 100 years old. I don't think the receivers are in great place. I don't think the defense is in great place. They have a first-time head coach. This to me screams 2-15, and they're kind of happy they won two. That's how the New Orleans Saints look to me right now. So I'm going to go with no. I think they will be drafting number 1 overall, and they will be trying to get Archie Manning to convince his grandson to come out and become a New Orleans Saint. That's what I think is going to happen.
That honestly sounds very reasonable. However, going back to what we just said about the Tennessee Titans, I think it's going to be almost a tie between who is more trash this season, the Saints or the Titans. Just look down south and it'll be one of those two teams because they're both going to be equally pretty terrible. But you do make a compelling point of they have so much turnover and a brand new head coach. Sure, the Titans have a second-year head coach. It's not that different, but one season in the NFL at head coach gives you a little more experience. You know a little bit more what you're doing. But man, I don't know. Tyler Shuck is not standing out to me in the way that they thought he would when they drafted him so high.
But he was also like 25 years old when he came out. I mean, I don't know what they thought the upside really was. The only other team that I might nominate as of right now, and you never know whose quarterback's going to get hurt and just have the wheels come off, but I might nominate the New York Jets. Aaron Glenn, I
Mm.
think, has a chance to be a good head coach someday, but they are starting Justin Fields. What does that mean? It means Justin Fields will get hurt because he always does. And it also means that he's not a guy who's going to elevate your franchise. They could have it go down bad as well. I'd throw them out there. Aside from that, it's hard to put a finger on who else could be that bad. Like even the
Yeah,
Jaguars should win some games. They've got a
sure.
little bit of talent there. And I can't think of anybody else in the NFC who could just have so little on their team that they could win 2 or 3 games. Last year, I feel like at this time we would have said, "Yeah, Titans. They
Mhm.
should be one of the worst teams in the league with Will Levis starting." That is the Saints for this year.
Yeah, and then I would like to finish it off with the Steelers and their owner Art Rooney II, who said in a quote, "Aaron Rodgers is everything you could ask for." I want to finish that quote because I do think context is important here. Said Aaron's come in and he's been everything you could ask for in terms of working with his teammates, working with the younger guys, and working with the offense. That's pretty high praise, though, from the owner of your team to Aaron Rodgers. And I do have to question if he is this complimentary because Aaron Rodgers has the stature that he does, like almost outside of football. Aaron Rodgers has almost eclipsed like football player in my mind. He's now like celebrity. He has this status. Like it almost makes you look good to align with him at some level. So I feel like that is playing into the compliments that he's getting from Art Rooney. But I just is the team going to be that great if Aaron Rodgers is your like godsend?
No, I think that you're barking up the right tree with that's just kind of what you're going to say because they really went out on a limb for Aaron Rodgers. And the biggest question is how much does he really want this? How much does he want to play? Because with the Jets, didn't look like he was having a great time or that he really wanted to be there. So you kind of have to address that of like, no, we made the right move. He looks great. It's totally fine. Rodgers is going to be the best and he's going to get us to the playoffs and all that. I will credit Rodgers for doing things that absolutely every single starting quarterback ever should do, like showing up to practice and talking to your teammates. Wow. Well done. You showed up for OTAs this time. Oh my gosh, that's incredible work. Maybe he realized it does matter as opposed to going on vacation like he did last year with the Jets. But I guess what comes to mind for me is if Aaron Rodgers is everything they could ask for, which would mean being realistic about where he is right now with his talent, but the best possible version, how far can the Pittsburgh Steelers go? Do you think if he is the best possible, not Aaron Rodgers 2010 or Aaron Rodgers even 2020, but the best possible version of Aaron Rodgers in 2025?
So listen, Tomlin has never had a losing season. We've all seen that stat, but he also critically has not won a playoff game since 2016. And they got whooped by the Ravens last year. So I think when I'm looking at their schedule, they're playing the Vikings, obviously, in Ireland. That's going to put some wear and tear on the body. That's a long trip, big flight, whatever. You look at weeks 13 and 14, those are really make it or break it games. They have the Bills and the Ravens back to back towards the end of the season. Those are going to be tough. And can Aaron Rodgers stay healthy? I hate to use the cliche of like, oh, he's old. He literally got injured in his first game with the Jets. We don't know if he's healthy. And if he's not at that point, like you're kind of cooked. Yeah, you have some talent. You got DK Metcalf, TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick, but I just don't see them making another playoff berth, truthfully. I don't think they have the firepower. And he's too old, in my opinion. I hate to say it. I'm not trying to be ageist. He's too old. He's 41. Pack it up, my guy.
As long as Joe Flacco and Aaron Rodgers are still around, then it's still my NFL that I have covered for my entire career with both of those guys. But I think with Rodgers, the best version is probably the second half of last year with the Jets, where they were already out of it and he had some really good games, but it wasn't good enough because the thing that made Aaron Rodgers truly great was his playmaking ability. And if that's not there anymore, he's just sort of a pocket quarterback who is he plays very conservatively. He throws the ball out of bounds a lot. He likes to throw it underneath. He doesn't like to take as many risks as he used to. That to me says exactly where you're going with this, which is it seems like a team that could make the first round of the playoffs because they've got enough talent. Otherwise, they could have a top 3 defense in the NFL. They've got so much talent there. Are they a Super Bowl contender? I think he would have to be more than what you could ask for because I'm not totally sold on DK Metcalf there. I don't think that they've got great weapons. Don't think they have a great backfield. Don't think they have a great offensive line. Don't think they have a great offensive coordinator. And you know who does have those things? The Baltimore Ravens. And it's really what comes down to is who's going to win out, Cincinnati's offense or Pittsburgh's defense, because he's going to have to play, I think, more to that defense because he can't dominate the way he used to. So I look at them as best version of Aaron Rodgers is a 10-win team probably, which is not horrible, but it's also not what they're really looking for.
I think that's fair. I think they were over projecting and being a little optimistic here, if you will.
The Robinson Rundown, a staple now of the show for our special contributor, Maggie Robinson. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you again next week.
Sounds good. Football.
Football. All right, there you go. Maggie Robinson, another great appearance on the show. And what she's going to be doing is just that throughout the season, which is coming up with 5 topics from around the NFL for us to break down. Because on this show, we get so deep in the weeds with the third tight ends and the punting competitions and everything else. I like to also, hey, there's a huge National Football League that's pretty fun to look at as well. And she does a great job picking out the topics for us to chat about. So that is going to become a staple of the show throughout the season. I'm planning a really great lineup for the season with a roundtable with Manny Hill and Brian Murphy. Jeremiah Searles will be back for Tuesday Morning Left Guard, which is going to be every Tuesday night when that airs. Also lots of guests from around the league as always. And, it'd be fun. And the hardcore preview each week with Andrew Kramer, which is one of my favorite things. So it's going to be a great season for us. Let me get a few more questions in there before we wrap up for this evening. My expectation is it will be a practice tomorrow with a lot more takeaways. And we can, dive into how JJ McCarthy looked a little bit more than today, which was just a walkthrough. And Alec Lewis and I are supposed to record a podcast right after practice tomorrow. So hoping that we can work that out as well. So I did see a couple questions that I thought were reasonable to jump into. Mike asked earlier, and sorry, maybe Mike's not still here, but I'll answer it anyway. Any chance that Carson Wentz is a consideration? He did back up Mahomes and played for Andy Reid. I just don't know what Carson Wentz wants, if he wants to be a backup again, or if Carson Wentz is kind of waiting around to see. I felt that way about Ryan Tannehill, that maybe guys like Ryan Tannehill and Carson Wentz are at a point in their lives and their career where they're going, I'll stay in shape, I'll stay ready. And if someone wants to make me their starting quarterback, I'll do it. I'll come out of retirement or come out of free agency the way that Joe Flacco did, and I'll come play. But if I'm just going to sit there with a clipboard, I've made enough money. I've been around the league enough that I'm just going to let somebody else do that. That was kind of Joe Flacco's mentality until the Browns came to get him, and then he was a backup last year in Indianapolis. But I'm sure that he knew that he was going to get a chance to play there, and he sticks around and he wins the Browns job at 40 years old. That's just a guess. I haven't seen any interviews or conversations with Carson Wentz where he's made it clear that he's retiring. So I assume that he's still out there. And hey, maybe there's another part of him that wanted nothing to do with camp and he wanted to hunt in the Dakotas or whatever and then show up at the last minute. So maybe we'll see him. I've always thought he was a good option for their backup, but is he a way better option than Sam Howell? Yeah, he actually might be. He actually might be a way better option. The last time he started, he at least gave a team a chance to make the playoffs and didn't work out for him. But you're looking for someone who can go 500, and Carson Wentz can probably do that. So if he's an option, I would say go for it. But just with where he's at right now and the amount of teams that could use backups, like I saw the Dallas Cowboys, they traded for Joe Milton, and he just has not been it for them. So they're looking for a backup quarterback as well. I imagine there are a couple other teams that are in the market for a backup that would call Carson Wentz and wonder if he was going to play this year. Just have not seen anything come out of that. I like Nathan's idea here. How high of a pick would you trade for Andy Dalton and Adam Thielen to secure the backup quarterback and wide receiver for the first month? I love where your head's at with the creativity. Now I think Dalton is actually a little banged up. I'm not sure, but if I'm Carolina, I'm not giving up Andy Dalton because look, last year they had to bring him in when Bryce Young was struggling, and if Bryce Young gets banged up, he's not the biggest guy. Then Dalton proved last year that he could still come in and win games, unless Jack Plummer. If I know Carolina's third quarterback, I've gotten way too deep in the preseason weeds and it's time for the season, but I think it's Jack Plummer. I don't think he's all that good. So I think they'll stay with him. But if in your scenario, let's just say I would do like a fourth and a 2027 fifth. I mean, you can't give up too much more than that because you're not talking about Andy Dalton taking you to the Super Bowl or something. You're just hoping to survive. Skull 357 says, what about a play for Anthony Richardson? Is there a chance that Kwesi and KOC lowball the Colts and trade for him? We know they still like him. We do have some precedent for that, which would be Trey Lance. I mean, this is the Trey Lance situation to a T, where they draft a super athletic guy, they try to play him, he gets banged up, he doesn't play well, they bench him, they trade him, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was a fourth round pick. Now, it does sound a little crazy, but if you could get Anthony Richardson for a fourth round draft pick, why wouldn't you? I know it feels like a waste, but I mean, he even won some games with Indianapolis and you could use him for something. I mean, if you're at the goal line, you bring in Anthony Richardson, right? I mean, you could probably use him as a short yardage quarterback. I don't know. Maybe we were talking about Madden earlier. Maybe it's a little too Madden-y, but Kevin O'Connell, I mean, he does this, and you think about it this way, and this might be the Kwesi, wheels turning, which would be, you guys love your comp picks. Well, if you made a trade for him, if you have to give up a fourth, it's kind of hard to get a third as a comp pick. So I don't know, but maybe there's a sixth or something, and it could turn into a fifth if he signed elsewhere. Who knows? I know that O'Connell likes Anthony Richardson. I know that they liked him coming out, and you saw the video probably of O'Connell, giving some kind words to Richardson after that game last year. So there is an appreciation there. And Kevin O'Connell, I mean, when he sees a wounded animal quarterback, he wants to go out and pick him up. And I remember last year being kind of against them getting Daniel Jones, which this means they get some sort of extra comp pick. Congratulations, everyone. But I don't see really the downside. I guess the only downside is that you're talking about, you already have JJ McCarthy. But if you gave me the option of rather going to Anthony Richardson if McCarthy went down, or Sam Howell, like, I would want Richardson. It's not even close. At least he would be fun as hell. and crazy to watch. He might throw the ball 75 yards or something. Like, I don't know. I would much rather do that. But is it worth a fourth? Yeah, I don't know. With where he's at, you've got your franchise quarterback. You don't want any controversy. Would I be shocked though if they called and said, "Hey, what do you guys want for Richardson?" I would, of course, not be shocked at all because it's Kevin O'Connell. Conrad says, asked you last night. I must have missed it. Do you think we could go 2-1 without Jordan Addison? Not putting any pressure on you. You could put all the pressure on me that you want to answer questions of predictions like that. Do I think that they can go 2-1? Of course so. Of course I do. I mean, they won games without Addison last year. Where this really swings to me and becomes more challenging is if Naylor is banged up. Then it becomes more tricky. But they showed, if you look at the Texans game, Sherfield got a catch, Powell got a catch. Like, it's not impossible when it comes to winning without other wide receivers in there. It's just a little bit more difficult. And you look at their first 3 games, I think they have to go 3-0 or 2-1 based on where the schedule goes after that. They're all winnable games. Cincinnati is going to be a hard one, but you should beat Chicago, in my opinion. I've been looking at the line there to see if it changes at all. That's a little bit closer than I would have expected, but no one really knows what to expect from the quarterbacks. I think it's the Vikings favored by 1.5, which on FanDuel, by the way. I would have thought that it would have been a little bit more toward the Vikings right now based on some of the stuff we've heard out of camp for the Bears, but no one really knows. They can definitely go 2-1. They've got a healthy team. They've got lots of talent. They've got their superstar wide receiver who's going to really drive the offense the most. It's not that they will not miss Jordan Addison, but you can get through it. It's my thing is for the rest of the season, if you don't love what you're getting from Jalen Naylor, like we've acted like Naylor is this really proven wide receiver. I mean, he's got 20 something catches last year. Do you need someone else to feel better about the depth as a whole? Because if somebody got hurt, then where are you really at? That's more of my question, not just the 3 games. By the way, FanDuel question of the day, let me add on something to that, which was I asked who the biggest threat to Jefferson is for Offensive Player of the Year. I would also love any players that aren't getting any discussion in the Offensive Player of the Year or that aren't getting any discussion for the top fantasy picks or whatever that you think could sort of break out and be Offensive Player of the Year. So if you've got like deep cut guys or even just second level that never get talked about, hey, throw them out there. Drake London. There you go. Nathan, great one. Drake London for Offensive Player of the Year. Very possible. If they throw it, I mean, Penix is going to throw it like crazy. They're going to throw 700 passes, I think, with Penix. I think that's what they want to do there. Video with the super chat. Really appreciate that. And yes, I know I get behind on the comments, but I try to answer many of them. So that's why that happens. There is not a collective that gets together of podcasters that decides the Mr. Mankato, but I think that we all sort of understand who it is by the end. Usually it just presents itself. Like it's so obvious it was this guy that came out of nowhere. This year there's a lot of good discussions there. Son of Beavers, do you think that we sign anyone of note after the 3rd preseason game like Stephon Gilmore or Asante Samuel Jr.? I was told Asante Samuel Jr. was signing months ago. What happened? But I mean, seriously though, like what happened? I guess he must have an injury problem. I think what they'll do is they'll probably sign somebody after cut down day, but I don't know what it's going to be. Is it going to be an additional wide receiver? If I had to guess, I would say yes, but I think that it's going to be along the lines of the Aldrick Robinson type of signing where you go, oh, yeah, I've heard of that guy. And that's more or less what they end up doing. I wouldn't expect that there's some sort of big play. Like, I think the roster is what it is. It's just this one position is kind of glaring because of a very unique and odd situation. Last year, we knew that they were chasing Gilmore all summer long, trying to get him to the Vikings because they did not like where they were at with that position. But every other position, though, I think they should feel good about where they're at corner right now. Okudah is still going to be a major question until it actually happens. And when I watch him in practice, I go, there are going to be some flags if he's out on the field. He plays so physically, but that sometimes leads to penalties. That's something that we're watching at the beginning of the season. I think he's had a really good camp. Does that carry over? But as far as Rodgers and Murphy goes, as far as the way Theo Jackson has played, has been really good to me. The safety position is still going to have some question there with Harrison Smith, and he's been out with an illness. And then, Josh Metellus, how much three safety is on the field. But there isn't any other position that I'm going, man, they better pick some people up because they are screwed. No, I think they've built a pretty darn deep team. Son of Beaver says we should come up with a list of Mr. Mankato's for this year. I think there's at least 4 or 5 guys. Max Brosmer, Elijah Williams, Xavier Scott. Lucky Jackson can still do it because he hasn't played in a game. And heck, if somehow Thayer Thomas came out of this thing, that would be a Mr. Mankato. I'll still throw Zamiah Vaughn. Zamiah Vaughn's just been quietly solid through the entire training camp. He hasn't had picks, hasn't had a bunch of flashy PBUs. He's just right place where he's supposed to be, moves well, covers his wide receiver. It's just not flashy. But if Zamiah Vaughn got 2 picks in the 3rd preseason game, then all of a sudden he goes from the UDFA to being, pretty exciting. I don't believe Robert Mays, one of the comments asking about Robert Mays, I don't believe he made it out to camp this year. I didn't see him. If he did, usually he would let me know. So he didn't make it out to Vikings camp this year. I think he went on a little bit of a different tour than usual. So it's kind of depends. But I'll get Robert on the show at some point for sure. And always great conversations with him. Love his podcast. Ooh, I like this one for the FanDuel question of the day here. Maybe Brock Bowers is a dark horse for player of the year. Yeah. I mean, my question about Bowers is he really the most dominant tight end, or was it just that Aiden O'Connell had to throw to the tight end every play? That's always a question as well. Mike says, as much as we worry about QB2, if JJ isn't healthy, or it is going to be really a tough sled to pull. I mean, that's totally right. And look, a lot of the QB2 thing is just because it's here. Like that question is here. When the head coach says it's an open competition, well, let's have that conversation then. And then when Max Brosmer shows up and does his thing as QB4 from the start, let's have that conversation. But ultimately, the original rule of Purple Insider was that we don't talk about the backup situation because we don't talk about screwed on the show. And at the moment, it does feel like screwed. But can you get it to a point where it's not? That would be really the question. Can you get it to a spot where it's Carson Wentz and you feel like it's not screwed? It's more of just not ideal if JJ McCarthy got hurt. But you're absolutely right. I mean, if he goes out, it's going to be a very tough season. And that's why when we're projecting, I just always assume health and then we'll see what happens. Jude said, what do you think of Zamiah Vaughn's 2nd preseason game? Thought he had a good game with some nice PBUs and good and sticky in coverage. The thing about Zamiah in these first 2 games, I just haven't really noticed him a lot, which I think is a good thing for a corner. It has not been flashy. It hasn't been, oh my gosh, Zamiah Vaughn is just making interceptions left and right, pass breakups left and right. It's been, he's kind of right place, right time. And that's what you're supposed to have happen for a lot of these corners. So, I think Zamiah is just it's very straightforward where he's just been good and he's on the roster and he's not going to light you on fire, but he's a good solid backup. What that means for Dwight McGlothern, that's the question. Is Dwight McGlothern now out? That would be the question. William says, I thought we were screwed in 2017 when Case Keenum got the job. I've probably told you guys that story before, that I canceled a trip to cover the game in Chicago because Case was starting and I just didn't want to waste at the time my company's travel money. I was like, let's save it for the combine. Cause we had a budget to go on X number of trips. And I was like, let's just, it's not worth it. And then he comes into that game, comes back and wins that one. And then it was kind of off from there. But I also looked this up maybe it was a year or 2 ago, what the win percentage is for backup quarterbacks in the league. And I came up with about 30%. Could this team still make the playoffs with Sam Howell? Are they good enough? Like, yeah, they are good enough to win 9, and maybe it's possible. But that Case Keenum thing, I mean, that comes along. How often does that come along where a backup wins 13 games? You heard Kerry Collins get mentioned earlier on the show to Maggie. I mean, that '08 season, like those seasons are remembered forever when a quarterback comes from being a backup to win. So that's how rare it is. What would New England take for Efton Chisholm? Yeah, he was good. He was good. I think they're just going to keep him. That would be my guess. Is that they're just probably going to keep him in New England because he's been pretty good. I think he also got banged up. Steven Ben Urasek seems to have been quietly solid. I agree. Just quietly solid. He has not been flashy, but he's run blocked pretty well, and he's caught the passes that have come his way. That's what you can hope for a tight end 3. Traveler interested in how Penix does year 2. Me too. Atlanta's one of the most interesting teams in the league because of how they went all in on Michael Penix and that draft pick, which was the right thing to do. And hey, I'm just saying the old Purple Insider show was one of the few podcasts or TV networks that was like, no, that's a good idea because Kirk Cousins' Achilles might not ever recover. But Penix can throw the heck out of the ball. And I'm trying to think about what kind of comp like Penix is. How often do we see these days a guy who's just in the pocket, stands there and just pumps footballs downfield into tight windows? Not often, right? Is he going to be like, and I know Jay Cutler would move a little bit, but for some reason, like Jay Cutler came to mind for me, this huge arm dude who's just going to push it into windows, and sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it doesn't. Maybe a little bit better on the leadership side from Penix. He's got the weapons to be good, though. LDR believer, will Burrow even be healthy by week 3? Yeah, I mean, and I saw just recently in the last hour that Dalton Reisner left Cincinnati without a contract. Like, what is Cincinnati doing? It's sort of how I felt about the Vikings interior last year. I think you have to sign Dalton Reisner. He's actually a way better fit for Cincinnati because they don't need to run the ball. They just throw it all the time. Reisner should be good for them. That's why they can't build an offensive line is crazy. Mark, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate that. Yeah, Mitchell Tinsley is a guy who seems to get a lot of conversation out of Cincinnati. I think he'll probably make the team. Also, thank you very much, Brett, for the super chat. You guys are the best. You guys still hanging around here after 9 o'clock, giving super chats. I mean, shout out to you guys. You guys are the ball knowers. Rage the Beast Within. Hope Max Brosmer will be getting the nod for the final tune-up game. I don't think he'll be starting. You can't say if you're O'Connell that it's an open competition and then start the 4th quarterback, right? That would be kind of odd to me. So I think that they will be playing the other guys. So anyway, when our reporters block from practice, that would be after tomorrow. So tomorrow is going to be our first practice, our last practice that we get to see the entire thing. So I'm hoping that we can come back and have a celebration of training camp. We can go all the things we learned and remember all the memories along the way. Maybe we could play sappy music like Hallmark Channel or something and reflect on the camp that was. It really has been. I'll start now as I just put a wrap on the show. It has been the most fun training camp to cover. You guys are a major reason. It's been the most interesting to cover. This team is got something to it with the leadership, the Jonathan Grenard type players, the Aaron Jones, the way, Justin Jefferson hasn't been out there, but Jordan Addison and the way that he's played in camp, and TJ Hawkinson, and there's just Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave. Like, there's so much talent on this team, and there is a feeling that they know it. Like, they know how good they are, and you just don't always run into that. Like, a lot of training camps, you're going, if everything goes right, maybe. That's been, that longtime listeners to the show know that, of how you start to add up. Well, this goes right, then Kirk can win. You go, probably not. But idea of anything is possible with JJ McCarthy, and it is a completely new frontier for the Minnesota Vikings. If this goes really well, it'll be something we go back to all the time. Like, remember those joint practices? Remember the time he got in the fight with that UDFA defensive end? Remember that, things like that. There's been a lot of moments for JJ McCarthy. It's been a long journey. It's been a long training camp. And, I don't look this sunburnt usually when we get to winter. I'll look much more pasty because I'll be inside. We do get to see the warm-ups of practice, take attendance, but we don't watch the whole practice after this. So it's been a really fun time. And that's why you guys have inspired me with all your viewership and all your comments and all of your support. You have inspired me to change the way I'm going to do this going forward, to where I was kind of just doing regular podcasts and posting them whenever. But now I want to continue with this momentum and do this on a nightly basis. So that's been because of all the great comments. And I know that I do, fall behind. I do fall behind. Celeste's retirement planner, or I'm sorry, I'm not able to see Celestine's. Sorry about that. Retirement planner. I haven't brought up my neck roll question to Brian Flores. That is true. It was actually about big pads. That's what it was about. It was about why linebackers don't wear big pads anymore. So you guys can check that out if you want to watch the press conference. Pepper Johnson came up, and then like multiple people, when Brian Flores, this is how this is who I really am, that multiple people at the press conference, when Brian Flores said Pepper Johnson, they all looked at me like, you would be the one to know who Pepper Johnson is. And yes, of course I do. Number 52, New York Giants, Cleveland Browns, huge pads. So I had to throw it out there to ask Flores about the huge pads. That's another thing. I asked the owner about the Dragon and the Brian Flores about neck rolls. What's next? What's next for the Purple Insider brand? Who knows? Anyway, thank you so much, guys. Great chat. And if you're watching the replay, answer that FanDuel question of the day in the comments as well. And we'll see y'all tomorrow. I am hopeful that we will have a very eventful practice and we could take y'all through it, break it down. Hopeful to have Alec Lewis on the show tomorrow, record after practice, and then go from there into the future. So thanks again, everybody, so much for watching and listening, and we'll catch y'all later.